Hey guys, tonight we're travelling somewhere hot, ancient, and absolutely crawling with historical flavour. And by flavour, I mean food so foul it could start a curse. Before we dive into this dry, dusty buffet of doom, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you enjoy falling asleep to the slow, horrifying realisation that our ancestors ate things we wouldn't feed a raccoon. And let me know in the comments what time it is where you are, or what snack you're regretting right now. It's always fun to suffer together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that Nile breeze simulation, and let's step back in time into the sand-blasted nightmare of ancient Egyptian cuisine. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Egypt. No, not the glamorous Hollywood version with linen robes flowing in slow motion and eyeliner so sharp it could stab a deity. This is the real deal, circa 1350 BCE, the New Kingdom. The golden age of sand, sunstroke and gastrointestinal trauma. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? You're hungry. And you're about to learn that ancient Egyptian food is not the spiritual banquet of dates, figs, and roasted duck you saw in that museum diorama. It's more like, hope you enjoy spoiled grain baked into a loaf shaped like despair. Let's start with who you are. You are not Pharaoh. You are not a noble. You are not a priest or a scribe, or even that guy who gets to hold the fan in temple processions. You are a labourer, a field worker, possibly attached to a building crew. If you're unlucky, that building is a tomb. If you're very unlucky, it's your own. You live in a mud brick house, the size of a generous walk-in closet. No windows, no ventilation, and no furniture, unless you count the pile of straw pretending to be a bed. There's no mattress, no sheets, just woven mats and the overwhelming scent of humanity. You share this space with your spouse, 3 children, 1 goat, 2 chickens, and roughly 400,000 insects, each one louder and more judgmental than the last. Outside, the air is already hot. Not summer hot, Egypt hot. The kind of heat that hugs you like a wet blanket soaked in camel breath. The sun is climbing fast, and you're already sweating through your linen tunic, which, fun fact, is the only one you own. It hasn't been washed since last season's Nile flood, and it still smells faintly of mud, mildew, and ancient effort. Your stomach growls, not politely, not like, hey, maybe it's time for breakfast, more like, feed me before I start digesting your will to live. But there is no breakfast, not like you know it. No cereal, no toast, no eggs, definitely no coffee. Your entire diet depends on what survived the night, didn't spoil in the heat, and hasn't been stolen by a rat the size of your dreams. Your identity, in this world, is simple. You are a vessel for toil. A body that walks, carries, digs, sweats, eats just enough to not die, and repeats the cycle until the gods get bored and kill you with a random flood or a sneeze that turns septic. You are replaceable. No statues will be built in your honour. No songs will be sung. You're not one of the immortalised. You are, at best, a footnote in someone else's pyramid scheme. And yet, you live. Barely, hungrily, desperately trying to fill a belly that history forgot. Your name doesn't matter. Your place? Near the bottom. Your mission? Survive another day in a world where food is less of a celebration and more of an ongoing negotiation with rot, grit, and gastrointestinal betrayal. So welcome to ancient Egypt. You are here. You are starving. And everything you're about to eat is trying to kill you. You step outside. And by step, I mean stumble, half-conscious, half-starved, fully annoyed, The sun greets you like a slap. It doesn't rise in Egypt. It attacks. There's no gentle morning light. There's just an instant wall of heat that feels like you opened an oven door and climbed inside out of spite. The Nile glimmers in the distance like a cruel joke. It's the reason this whole civilization exists, and yet you're not allowed to drink from it directly, because it's also where livestock bathe, priests bless corpses, and your neighbour tosses in something that definitely used to be breathing. You cough, not because you're sick, yet, but because the air is filled with fine desert dust, ash from a neighbour's cook fire, and the powdered dreams of anyone who once thought ancient Egypt was elegant. It's early morning and you're already tired. Now food, you want some, that's adorable. Let's talk about what's not for breakfast. Meat. Unless something just died in front of you and no noble claimed it. Fruit. Already spoiled or reserved for temple offerings. Milk. Too expensive, too sour, and the cow has been missing for 2 weeks. Bread. In theory, yes. In practice, it's yesterday's brick with today's bugs. See, bread is the staple here. Not the fluffy golden loaf on your supermarket shelf. No. This is Egyptian bread, or what modern archaeologists politely call nutritionally dense, and less politely call inedible concrete. It's made from emmer wheat, which sounds exotic until you realise it's a type of grain that resists grinding, resents digestion, and holds onto sand like a treasured memory. The flour? Ground with stone tools. The result? Every bite of bread contains just enough grit to sandpaper your gums down to emotional powder. Over time, you develop a condition so common it's named in every ancient dental study: tooth abrasion from stone fragments. Translation: ancient Egyptian bread ate you back, and you will eat it, because it's that or starve. You chew slowly, not for taste, for survival. One wrong bite and you're spitting out a molar like a sad pyramid souvenir. Next, maybe some beer, but not beer like you know it. No foamy lager, no crisp IPA, no seasonal pumpkin ale with ironic labels. This is bread beer, fermented barley slurry. It's thick, lumpy, and comes with its own floating solids. Drinking it is like sipping warm pond water through a napkin full of breadcrumbs. It doesn't get you drunk. It barely gets you hydrated. But it's safer than Nile water, and it's technically food. Children drink it. Grandparents drink it. You drink it. Everyone's buzzed on disappointment. Your hunger is not gone, but it's muffled, buried under the sedimentary layers of the loaf you just chiselled through, and the lukewarm cereal beer slowly fermenting in your gut like an internal time bomb. You think, maybe I'll just go ask the neighbour for some honey. Except honey is worth more than you are. A spoonful is ceremonial. Sacred. Usually offered to gods, kings, or extremely persuasive wasps. You get whatever's stuck to the inside of a broken pot someone threw away last week. You hear a priest walking by, chanting a morning prayer. His robes are cleaner, his belly less hollow, because priests are the middlemen of divinity in the food chain. They get offerings, rations, donations. They eat better than you. Not well, just better. Meanwhile, your meal is baked dough rock, warm sludge beer, and the occasional boiled onion. You dream of olives. You imagine figs. You hallucinate cheese. You snap out of it when a fly lands on your lip. You swat it. You miss. You accept its presence like an old friend. Because in ancient Egypt, the food pyramid is real. And you're at the bottom, looking up, with crumbs in your teeth, and a haunting suspicion that they just don't make suffering like they used to. You think maybe this morning is just unusually rough. Maybe lunch will redeem the day. Maybe something, anything, will surprise you in a good way. But ancient Egypt does not run on hope. It runs on grain, sweat, and the silent prayers of people who know full well the gods aren't listening during mealtime. Lunch isn't a break. It's an obligation. A ritual of disappointment. You shuffle toward the communal outdoor hearth, shared by a few families. The smoke curls into the air like the ghost of a meal that never happened. One of your neighbours is boiling something in a pot that looks and smells like wet bandages and onion breath. You ask what it is. She says it's stew. You ask what's in it. She says what was available. You take a peek. Floating in the thin broth is half a leek, 2 dubious beans, and something that might be a beetle, or a legume, or both. This is your life now. You've eaten more insects by accident than protein on purpose. You sit and pull out your own contribution. A small sack of dried dates. They're hard, not crunchy, hard, like fossilized candy, except less sweet and more. What happens if you abandon fruit in the sun until it starts growing opinions? You chew, you regret, you swallow, you endure. Then you drink more beer. Not because you want to, but because chewing has made your teeth ache again, and the lukewarm slop is the only thing soft enough to count as hydration. Someone offers you a fish. It's already been cooked, which sounds promising until you realise cooked just means it was buried in coals and forgotten. Its skin is blackened, its eyes are gone, its smell, a combination of river mud and haunted dreams. You nibble the edge, you immediately regret it. The texture is somewhere between wet sandal and old papyrus. The flavour is historical. Fish is a staple, yes. The Nile is full of them. But fresh fish is for the temples, the rich, and funerals. You get the leftover catch, dried in the sun, coated in flies, and rehydrated in what's left of your optimism. Oh, and bones. So many bones. Tiny needle-like invisible bones. You chew carefully, but inevitably, one ends up stabbing your gums like a passive-aggressive reminder of how little control you have over your own digestive process. Around you, others eat in silence, not out of reverence, just exhaustion. Food is not pleasure. It's work. It's a gamble. It's a daily reminder that your stomach is a pit you shovel sadness into and hope it doesn't shovel back. You glance down at your hands, rough, cracked, stained with flour and smoke. This morning you ground grain by hand for an hour, and the flour still came out coarse, lumpy, and filled with bits of the grinding stone itself. You baked it into a sad little disc of bread so heavy it could anchor a boat. And you're eating it anyway, because there is no other option, because this is nourishment in ancient Egypt, a daily exchange of dignity for survival. You once dreamed of honeycakes, of roasted goose, of milk fresh from the cow instead of fermented in a clay jar under someone's bed. But those were the dreams of childhood. Now you're old enough to know that unless you're making offerings to the gods, or bribes to the priests, your meals will remain locked in the culinary basement of history. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve. It's filthy, but at least it's your filth. A child walks by holding a handful of raw lentils, chewing them like candy. You want to warn him, but what's the point? He'll learn. He'll learn that nothing is truly edible, only tolerable, and only until it turns on you. One of the elders starts coughing mid-meal. Not politely, horribly. He doubles over, clutching his side, eyes bulging like the fish you tried not to eat. No one rushes to help. Why would they? That cough has been coming for months, and at this point, it's just background noise. It's not whether you died choking on bones or coughing out your lungs, it's when, and how loud it'll be. Your midday break ends, not because you're rested, but because the sun says so. There's no clock, only shadows, only pain, only the gradual decline of your physical integrity, interrupted by poorly cooked legumes and fear-based beer consumption. You get up slowly, your knees creak, you belch something that tastes like boiled despair. Your stomach gurgles. It might be hunger. It might be parasites. There's no way to tell. You walk it off. Because that's the only cure you can afford. And as you shuffle back toward whatever labour the rest of the day holds, you realise something horrifying. You'll be hungry again by sunset. And you'll eat again. The same thing, in the same way. And you'll tell yourself it's fine, because if you don't, your brain might just stop pretending this life is livable. The sun is still climbing. Your shadow huddles close to your feet, trying to escape with more dignity than you. You walk, slowly, carefully, because the sandals you're wearing are made of woven reeds and broken promises, and the road beneath you is hot enough to cook one of those pitiful river fish you gagged on earlier. There's no such thing as an afternoon snack. If you're lucky, you might find a dried fig clinging to the inside of your food pouch. If you're unlucky, you'll find what used to be a dried fig, now partially digested by ants. You think of sweets, honey cakes, fruit preserves, some soft golden pastry filled with dates and dreams, but those aren't for you. Those are for offerings, tombs and aristocrats with names long enough to require their own scroll. You get date paste, not a paste made from dates. More like the remains of what dates become when mashed by hand and stored in a jar sealed with dry leaves and the vague hope it didn't ferment in the sun. You take a fingerful. It sticks to your hand like sadness. You lick it off. It's sweet, yes, but also gritty. Everything is gritty, because the wind carries sand, and the sand goes everywhere, into your mouth, your nose, your food, your soul. Your stomach has stopped growling. That's not good. That's the stomach version of giving up. It's moved past hunger and into the foggy territory of, fine, feed me or don't, let's just get this over with. You sit in the shade of a wall that's older than any written language you can read. Across from you, someone's child is trying to chew on roasted chickpeas that have been overcooked to the consistency of pebbles. He gives up, throws one at a goat, the goat eats it, the goat immediately regrets it. You sip water from a clay jar. It's warm, slightly cloudy. It tastes like it remembered a fish. But it's liquid, and that's good enough. You glance at your hands again. The palms are calloused, your fingernails black with dirt. You haven't had time to clean under them because you've been too busy grinding grain, hauling baskets, sweating, coughing, eating rocks disguised as bread, and pretending everything is normal. A priest walks by again. He's fatter than you remember. His robes are embroidered. His scent, actual perfume made from imported myrrh. You smell like effort. He smells like leisure. And somewhere between the two lies everything you'll never become. You stare at him. He notices. He doesn't stop walking. He just smiles. It's not a kind smile. It's the smile of someone who had goose and honey for breakfast and knows you'd trade your children for a spoonful. You wonder what it's like to be full. Not bloated, not stuffed. Just satisfied. Just once. Just one meal that ends with a sigh of contentment and not a distant panic about what you'll eat tomorrow. Your feet hurt. Your stomach hurts. Your teeth hurt. Your pride hurts. But mostly you're just numb. You reach into your pouch and pull out one last thing. A few lupin beans. Bitter. Hard. Poisonous if not prepared properly. You chew slowly, because chewing fast might kill you. They've been boiled, you think. You hope. You pretend. Someone walks by carrying a tray of food to the temple. On it, roasted fowl, honey, fruit, bread that looks like actual bread, pomegranates. You stare. Not longingly. Not even angrily. Just blankly. Like someone looking at a mural of a life they'll never live. That food isn't for you. It's for the gods. Or the statues of the gods. Or the priests, who are very good at interpreting divine silence into very edible benefits. You look down at your own hands again. Still dirty, still cracked, still clutching an empty pouch and a half-eaten lupin bean. Your name? Still unimportant. Your role? Still thankless. Your daily existence? Still a series of difficult meals arranged between bouts of hard labour and spiritual blackmail. And now you understand something truly bleak. Your identity here, your entire sense of self, is built around not dying of hunger. That's it. Not rising. Not dreaming. Not changing the world. Just outliving the next bowl of boiled weeds. You used to think food was fuel. Now you know it's punishment. A test. A joke. A relic of hope from a time when you still believed dinner might improve your mood. You get up, slowly. Every joint sounds like it's being negotiated by a scribe. You wipe your hands on your tunic. It makes no difference. You're still coated in the ancient Egyptian blend of dust, sweat, and despair. A dog barks nearby. You flinch, because you've seen what hungry dogs will do, and frankly, they're better fed than you. You walk again. Toward what? You're not sure. Probably a task. Probably some duty you didn't ask for, won't be thanked for, and will have to repeat tomorrow. But one thing is certain. You'll be hungry again. And when that time comes, you'll eat whatever you can. Something dry, something mushy, something boiled, fermented, left out too long, blessed, cursed, or vaguely edible. And you will chew, and you will swallow, and you will call it a meal. Because you are not a pharaoh. You are not a scribe. You are not a god. You are a stomach with a name no one will write down. And ancient Egypt feeds you just enough to keep that stomach grumbling, but never ever full. Welcome home, if you can call it that. Your house is a rectangle. Mud brick, flat roof. 3 walls that sweat dust, and one that lets it in. Built with love, if by love you mean slave labour and a shortage of viable alternatives. No plumbing. No insulation. No windows, unless you count holes in the wall that scream in the wind like a mourning widow. You step inside. It's dark. Not cosy dark. Not curl up with a warm bowl of soup and a quiet evening dark. No. This is the hope you don't trip on something sharp and die of tetanus kind of dark. Light filters in through cracks and sadness. A small oil lamp flickers in the corner. It smells like burnt goat and desperation. The flame dances erratically, probably in protest of the air quality. And speaking of air, don't breathe too deeply. The mix is part dust, part smoke, part body odour aged in the sun for optimal pungency. The walls are rough, crumbly, and so close together that turning around without bumping into someone is an achievement worthy of engraving on a limestone tablet. There's a mat on the floor where people sleep, sit, eat, give birth, argue, pray, and die, sometimes all in one day. Above it, the ceiling hangs low and angry, sagging like it's tired of witnessing the human condition. The smell is complex. Part dried onions, part sweat, apart fermented lentils that lost the will to live. And beneath it all, a subtle aroma of mildew and wet clay, like someone tried to drown a compost pile and gave up halfway. There is no kitchen, just a fire pit and some blackened pots that once had dreams. The pots are chipped, the handles broken, each one stained with years of stewing the same 3 ingredients in different orders: grain, legume, regret. Sometimes, when it's too hot to cook inside, and it's always too hot, you cook outside, in the open air, on a fire that fights back. Flames licking up, wind choking the smoke into your eyes while you stir a pot of food that actively hates you. Flies circle overhead like tiny food critics, waiting to review your meal by laying eggs on it. Let's talk about the outside. The street outside your home isn't really a street. It's a dusty corridor between structures. Uneven, crowded, and loud. Every few feet, someone is yelling. About bread, about fish, about nothing. It echoes between the buildings like a chorus of bad decisions. Children run barefoot through dirt so packed with waste, ash, and dropped food that it qualifies as ancient compost. Dogs bark in the distance. Cats dart between homes like low-level deities on their lunch break. They eat better than you. They should. They're sacred. But you swat flies off your face with one hand while scraping the bottom of your food bowl with the other. The Nile is nearby. It flows like a lifeline through this chaos. It gives water, but also disease. It floods. It recedes. It mocks your attempts at farming. It's sacred. And also the reason your neighbour lost 3 children last month to waterborne infections nobody can name because nobody has invented microscopes yet. You walk toward it with a clay jug. It's cracked, of course. Everything is cracked. The jug, your sandals, your skin, your will. You scoop water carefully, avoiding the floating bits, avoiding eye contact with the fisherman, gutting something suspiciously bloated. You take the water back home and boil it, twice, then drink it anyway, then pray. Your bed, a mat, woven reeds, or maybe just your old tunic laid flat. You lie down at night and feel every pebble beneath you, like it's auditioning to become part of your spine. You cover yourself with a thin cloth that hasn't been washed since last flood season. It's stiff, not from starch, from history. Bugs crawl across your skin while you sleep. You don't swat them anymore. You just live with it. Because the bugs were here before you. They'll be here after. This is their house now. And when it rains, which almost never happens, it leaks. But when it doesn't rain, which is most of the time, it bakes. Your walls turn into a bread oven. Your roof radiates heat like a deity's passive-aggressive sigh. The air inside becomes soup, and you're the overcooked barley floating in it. The sounds never stop. There are no quiet evenings. There is shouting, singing, prayers, goats, more shouting, and of course, the steady, rhythmic grinding of grain against stone, because someone is always making more bread. Not better bread, just more of it. Because that's all you get. The bread, the beer, the cycle. Your food lives where you live, stored in jars, buried in pits, covered with lids made of woven grass and denial. It's dry, mouldy, or too moist in the wrong way. You inspect it daily for insects. And by inspect, I mean gently shake the container and hope whatever's living in there doesn't bite first. In the corner, a rat scurries past. It's fast, fat, and fearless. It knows you won't chase it. It knows you're both just trying to survive. You make eye contact. It nods. You nod back. Some nights you wake up coughing. The dust, the mould, the smoke from the cooking fire that never really goes out. It gets into your lungs, settles in your chest, builds a small, wheezing empire. You think about leaving. But where would you go? The next village is exactly the same. Same houses, same fire pits, same food, same stink. So you stay? Because movement is a luxury, and choices are for people with enough food to think clearly. You close your eyes. You listen to the wind whistle through the cracks in the wall. You hear someone retching outside, someone yelling, someone singing to a baby that won't survive the season. You curl tighter. Your stomach aches again. Not because you're hungry, but because it's full of whatever passed for stew tonight. You wonder if that fish was too far gone. You wonder if the beans were boiled enough. You wonder if tomorrow your body will finally say, no thanks, and let go. But for now, you're alive, not thriving, just breathing in a home made of dust, heat, and obligation. A home that shelters you from nothing but the idea of having it worse. And the worst part, you're used to it. This isn't shocking. This is routine. This is existence in ancient Egypt. Dust in your mouth, flies on your food, smoke in your lungs, and your soul tucked somewhere between the cracks in the wall and the cracks in your skin. The sun has opinions, strong ones, and it shares them constantly. There's no shade that isn't already taken, no breeze that isn't a cruel rumour. Just wave after wave of dry, oppressive heat, baking you, your house, your food, your hope. Your food storage is a clay jar, singular. If you're lucky, it has a cracked lid. If you're not, it's just an open invitation to every creature with legs, wings, or an evolutionary grudge. What's inside? Barley, maybe? Millet, if the gods were briefly distracted and accidentally showed you mercy? Also inside, weevils, small, thriving, crunchy. You don't remove them anymore, you just eat around them, or with them, because everything you eat comes with something extra. Grain comes with bugs, dates come with ants, fish comes with bones, bread comes with sorrow. And your water, your blessed, boiled, carefully rationed water, comes with texture. It's never clear, never cold. It tastes like the inside of a clay pipe that's been crying for 40 years. You pretend it's refreshing, because if you don't, your body might reject it out of self-respect. The fire pit is still smouldering. You add more fuel, dried dung. It's all you have. Wood is rare, expensive, hoarded, or cursed, depending on the village gossip. Dung, however, is abundant and enthusiastically flammable. You try not to think about what you're breathing in. You fail. Above your head, the ceiling groans. Not because of structural stress, just existential fatigue. It's made from bundles of reeds, patched with mud, reinforced with whatever was nearby. Cloth scraps, bird bones, a broken spoon. It leaks during rain. It sheds during heat. It houses spiders the size of theological debates. You glance at your neighbour's home. It's identical to yours. So is their suffering, their fire, their bread, their 1,000-yard stare. You wave. They nod. That's the full extent of your social life. A cat slinks by, dragging something that used to be a bird, and now looks like a regret. You wonder if it's edible. You've asked that question about a lot of things lately. Spoiled onions, a half-rotten radish, something in the stew you never identified and never will. You stop being picky around the same time you stop being able to chew without bleeding. Let's talk about the market. It's not a store. It's a dirt path with shouting. Vendors sit behind baskets of what they haven't already eaten. Withered garlic, crushed legumes, fish drying in the sun like sacrificial offerings to the god of intestinal failure. The smell? Ancient. Part fish, part dung, part raw humanity. It's the kind of smell that enters your nose and stays, like a guest who eats all your food and then moves into your memory forever. Prices aren't posted. You barter, you beg. You hope someone died recently and left behind a jar of pickled turnips. You try to trade a scrap of linen for a wedge of cheese. The seller laughs, because cheese is for people with goats, and goats are for people with land, and land is for people with power. You have a cloth that smells like dead rain. You walk away empty-handed and full of philosophical hunger. Back home, your food sits in the corner like a dare. Bread that could stop a blade, beer that's evolving its own microbiome, and a single onion, half sprouted, as bitter as your memories of the last harvest. You eat, slowly. Each bite is a confrontation. The bread scrapes your teeth. The beer bloats your gut. The onion burns your mouth like it's mad at you personally. And when you're done, you sit very still, because movement triggers regret. And you're already full of that. Your environment isn't passive. It participates in your suffering. It amplifies it. It decorates it with flies, dust, and sunstroke. Your food spoils faster than you can eat it. Your tools break faster than you can fix them. Your will? It's hanging on by a splinter of dried lentil. You once heard of someone who lived near a noble estate and stole a handful of honey from an offering table. They were caught, beaten, paraded through the streets with their hands tied and their mouth stuffed with reeds. Not as punishment, as symbolism. Because in Egypt, food is sacred, but only when it isn't yours. Your portion is survival. Their portion is ceremony. You look down at your belly. It's flat. Not because you're healthy, because your body has learned to run on fumes, prayer, and boiled despair. A bird calls in the distance. You look up. A heron flies overhead, graceful, effortless. You wonder what it eats. You wonder if you could catch it. You wonder if your teeth could handle the bones. You close your eyes. You breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. The air still tastes like yesterday's failure. But it's home. This mud brick box of heat and hunger and holy resignation. You exist here. Not comfortably, not proudly. Just currently. And that's the most you can hope for. It's evening now. Not that it matters. The heat hasn't gone away. It's just angrier in a quieter way. Settling into the walls, radiating off every surface, soaking into your skin like invisible fire. The kind of heat that doesn't burn you. It cooks you. Low and slow. You step outside to escape the staleness of the house. The air outside, not better. Still thick. Still hostile. But at least it moves. And that counts as luxury. You walk a little, because motion is all you have left to fight the hunger gnawing at your insides. Not the hunger for food, though that's always there, sharpening its knives, but the hunger for space. For a world where your meal doesn't depend on the Nile's mood swings or the rodent population's generosity. The dirt path under your feet is cracked and dry. Each step kicks up dust that settles on your tongue like powdered sandstone. You try not to taste it, but you do. Because it's in everything now. The air, the food, you. You pass a neighbour's home. They're squatting near a fire, blowing into it through a hollow reed, coaxing the flame to life so they can warm a pot that's been blackened by years of misuse and minor fires. You hear them mutter something, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. Hard to tell anymore. Both sound the same. They're cooking porridge. Or what passes for porridge? Grain boiled in water that's seen better lives. No salt, no oil, no spice, just heat and desperation. It bubbles gently, like it's trying to escape itself. The smell is bland, comforting, in theory, but it's laced with ash, and that makes your throat itch just by standing nearby. You move on, not far, just to a spot where the ground feels slightly cooler than the air, which is saying very little. You sit. Around you, people are preparing dinner. Every household within sight is engaged in the same slow-motion ritual of food preparation, grinding, stirring, boiling, blowing, coughing, complaining. A woman next door is pounding grain on a flat stone with a smaller stone. The sound is rhythmic, dull, endless. She's been at it for over an hour. It's not optional. If she doesn't do it, there's no flour. If there's no flour, there's no bread. And if there's no bread, well, no one says what happens. They just look at the baby in the corner with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes and stop talking. Nearby, a man is fishing with a net woven from palm fibres and last year's bad luck. He throws it into a canal that smells like broth gone wrong. It floats, shudders, and lies still. He waits, and waits, and waits, then pulls it up. One fish, small, still twitching, barely edible. He sighs like he's aged 10 years, and drops it in a bucket already half full of disappointment. Food is everywhere and nowhere. You can see it in the fields, rows of barley and emmer swaying in the faint breeze. You can see it hanging from palm trees, clusters of dates that are somehow always out of reach, already half eaten by birds with more initiative than you. You can see it rotting on offering tables, left for gods that don't eat, while your stomach argues with itself over whether it's technically a sin to eat temple trash, if you're very polite about it. You lie back. Your spine complains against the ground. But at least the dirt isn't sharp. You look at the sky, clear, infinite, a deep, rich blue that will fade to black without ceremony. You remember someone once said Egypt was the gift of the Nile. They clearly never had to eat here. The Nile giveth, yes, but mostly the Nile giveth bacteria, and then floodeth your home, and then ruineth your grain, and then leaveth your fish half dead, and the other half cursed. You hear the sound of something sizzling in the distance. You look. Someone is roasting a piece of meat. Meat. It takes your brain a moment to recognise it. Not because it's unfamiliar, but because it's unreal. Meat is a concept, a legend, a thing that happens to other people. You stare. Is it bird? Lizard? Cat? You don't care. The smell is powerful, rich, heavy. It drifts over the rooftops like a forgotten promise. Your mouth waters, not gently, not like a polite reaction, but violently, like your body just remembered a life you never had. You try not to show it. You look away. You fail. The neighbour cooking it glances at you, says nothing, flips the meat, stares straight ahead like they can feel your envy radiating across the alley. You go back inside, not because you're tired, because being near real food is too much. Inside, your home is still hot, still smoky, still crowded. Someone spilled beer earlier. It's soaked into the floor and dried into a sticky patch that smells like bad decisions. You sit in the corner. A bowl of porridge waits for you. It's lukewarm, slightly crusted around the edges. Someone already stirred it with their fingers. You eat it anyway. You don't chew. You don't taste. You just ingest. It fills a space. It solves nothing. You think about bread. Not because you want it, because you're obligated to think about it. Bread is currency. Bread is survival. Bread is the thing you wake up for, the thing you kneel to bake, the thing that grinds your teeth down year after year until your smile looks like a quarry accident. You think about milk, then you laugh. Milk is mythical. Milk is for infants and priests. Milk is for people who own livestock or know someone who owes them a favour. You remember once, years ago, you tasted cheese. Actual cheese. Someone brought it from a distant province. Soft. White. Salty. You cried a little. Not loudly. Just enough for it to sting. You finish your porridge, you lick the bowl. Not for etiquette, for calories. Outside, the sound of someone arguing over dried figs echoes through the street. Figs are precious. Figs are used to bribe, to trade, to offer to gods or lovers or officials who forgot to collect your taxes last month. You once traded a loaf of bread for a single fig. It was overripe, but it was sweet. And for 2 minutes, you felt like royalty. Then it gave you diarrhea for 3 days. Still worth it. You lie down. The mat beneath you has developed a curve that perfectly matches your spinal deformity. Your bones settle into it, like puzzle pieces made of suffering. A fly buzzes past your ear. You slap it, you miss, you sigh. It lands on your bowl. You let it. You close your eyes. You feel the heat, the hunger, the ache, the silence. And in that moment, between the discomfort and the darkness, you understand your environment for what it really is. A slow cooking oven for human endurance. A place where food exists just enough to keep you alive, and never enough to make you glad about it. This is your home. This is your Egypt. This is your life. And if you're very lucky, you'll do it again tomorrow. You wake up sweating. Not glistening. Not glowing. Sweating. The kind that seeps from every pore, coats your body like a second skin, and makes your mat squelch when you shift your weight. It's not even dawn yet. The sun hasn't shown its face. But the heat? Oh, the heat arrived early, slipped in overnight like a thief, and stole your will to function. You sit up, slowly, because every joint has stiffened into position overnight, moulded by your lumpy bedding and the hard packed earth beneath it. Your knees sound like a jar of dried chickpeas being shaken by a disappointed god. Your back protests the very idea of motion. But you move anyway, because if you don't get up now, the heat will make sure you regret it later. You open the door. A mistake. It's hotter outside. Air hits you like a wall. Dry. Immense. It's not air. It's weather in a solid state. You breathe in, and your nostrils sting. You breathe out, and your breath evaporates before it even reaches your lips. The dirt beneath your feet is already warm. The sun hasn't touched it yet, but the ground remembers yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. The heat is stored in the soil like trauma, rising up through your sandals and into your bones. You look at your neighbour. They're fanning themselves with a reed mat that's falling apart. They're not trying to cool down. They're just keeping the flies off their sweat. A losing battle. The flies in Egypt have unionized, and they love moisture. You are a buffet. You splash a bit of water on your face. It's not cold, it's not clean, but it's wet, and that's enough. For exactly 6 seconds. Then it evaporates, leaving behind a thin crust of minerals and shame. You check the food jars. Your barley? Infested. Your legumes? Soft, not in the good way. Your dried fish? Still technically dried, now with extra texture. You try to rescue a handful of grain, scoop around the insects, blow off the chaff. Pretend the smell is just earthy. You grind it, slowly, stone against stone. Sweat dripping from your face into the flour. You don't bother wiping it away. You're part of the recipe now. The flour is clumpy, coarse, and suspiciously grey. You add water, stir with your hand, shape it into a rough flatbread. It sags. You don't blame it. You bake it on a hot stone under the open sun. No need for a fire today. The earth is your oven. The sun your tyrannical chef. You eat it before it cools, because if you wait, the flies will win. You chew slowly, feeling the grit grind against your molars. You don't taste anything anymore. Not because the bread is bland, because your mouth has given up on the concept of pleasure. You drink beer. Warm, thick, half-fermented. Flat. A meal in liquid form. A survival tactic with bubbles. It coats your throat, settles in your belly like a brick. You feel slightly full, slightly nauseous, slightly regretful, which means it's working. The sun climbs, the heat intensifies, everything slows down. Even the wind is too tired to blow. Your neighbours stop speaking. The children stop crying. The animals lie down. Everyone and everything begins to wilt. You take cover in the shade. Your home is not cooler. It's just darker. A slow cooker with a mud brick lid. You lie down on your mat again, hoping to conserve energy. You don't nap. You simmer. Outside, someone screams. Not from injury, just frustration. It echoes through the alleyways, swallowed by the silence of everyone too exhausted to care. The food you stored this morning? Spoiled by evening. Fermented into failure. You swat a fly from your lip. Another lands on your arm. You let it. You've accepted your place in the food chain. Some days you eat. Some days you're eaten. You remember the stories the priest told, of paradise in the afterlife. Endless food, cool breezes, clean water. You believe them, not because you're pious, because the idea of eternal shade and unspoiled bread is the most comforting lie you've ever heard. You imagine it. Golden loaves, clear wine, fresh fruit with no worm inside, dates that don't crunch, fish without maggots, goose roasted, sliced, and served without a prayer or a punishment. You think about that for a long time. You think about it until the sun begins to lower and the ground finally lets go of a little heat. Only a little. And then night falls. But it doesn't get cold, it just gets dark. The heat lingers, draped over everything like a wet shroud. You try to eat again. The same bread, the same beer, the same complaints from your stomach. You chew in silence. You swallow hard. You tell yourself it's food. Because if it's not, then what has your life been? You lie down again. Your mat, still damp from this morning's sweat. You press your face into the cloth, and it smells like old bread and defeated hope. The stars above you twinkle, beautiful, distant. You don't care. You're too busy wondering if that last bowl of porridge was the one to finally kill you. Your eyes close, not in peace, in resignation. And as your body finally drifts towards sleep, one final thought burrows in your mind like a grain beetle in barley. Even if tomorrow is better, it will still taste the same. Before the sun fully rises, you're already working. There's no snooze button, no shift schedule, no HR department. Just the sound of someone outside yelling about irrigation and the quiet voice in your own head muttering, "It's this, or starve." You sit up, your legs ache, your spine feels like it's been used as scaffolding in a collapsed temple. Your arms are sore from yesterday's grind, literally. Grinding flour, grinding grain, grinding your expectations down to a smooth, powdery resignation. You stretch, everything cracks. Your joints sound like broken pottery being juggled by a drunk priest. You grab your tools. A sickle made of flint and wood. A basket woven from desperation and dry grass. And your own hands, which are somehow both numb and in constant pain. Today, like most days, you're headed to the fields. And by fields, we mean a patch of sun-scorched earth near the Nile where you and 50 other equally miserable people are expected to coax food from the ground like it owes you money. You arrive before the sun is fully overhead, because once it is, working feels less like agriculture and more like punishment by divine convection oven. The soil is dry and cracked until it's not. Because if the Nile has recently flooded, then everything is wet, not moist, sodden, mud up to your knees. Leeches clinging to your legs like tiny bureaucrats asking if you've paid your seasonal tithe. Either way you lose. Too dry, and the crops die. Too wet, and so do your boots. Assuming you had boots, you don't. You wade into the field barefoot, because sandals were yesterday's casualty. The mud slurps at your ankles like it's trying to pull you under and keep you. And honestly, part of you wishes it would. You plant, you weed, you dig, you sweat. Every motion is a negotiation between willpower and collapsing cartilage. You bend at the waist. You lift with your back because no one told you not to. You swing your arms like you're trying to summon the ghost of your former self, one who maybe dreamed of something better than this. The sun rises higher. It doesn't just shine, it presses. It bears down on your shoulders like an angry god with a heat fetish. You squint through the glare and keep working, because if you stop, the overseer sees. And if the overseer sees, your dinner sees a sudden and dramatic reduction. Lunch break. Technically, it exists, in the sense that you stop moving for 10 minutes to chew on bread so dry it threatens to redecorate your lungs. You sit in the shade of a palm tree. If there is one. If there isn't, you crouch in the shadow of your own regrets. You eat. Bread. Beer. Maybe a sprig of onion, if you're splurging. The bread is yesterday's leftovers, hardened to the consistency of limestone and flavoured mostly with chew-induced despair. The beer is warm, always thick, sour in a way that feels intentional. It fills you up, sort of. Just enough to keep you conscious. Not enough to keep you happy. And then it's back to work. The field is unkind. The tools are crude. The sun is now actively mocking you. You see a bird overhead. You hate it. It can fly. It can leave. It doesn't have to weed barley one stalk at a time while praying not to step on a snake or into a hidden patch of fire ants. Your stomach churns. Is it hunger? Is it the beer? Is it worms? Yes, you keep going, because the land won't till itself. And if it did, it would probably still expect you to pay rent on it. In the distance, you see someone stumble. They collapse. Everyone keeps working. No one reacts, because falling over in the field isn't unusual. It's not dramatic. It's not even worth talking about. You either get up, or you don't. If you get up, congratulations. If you don't, someone else will step over you before the hour is out. You wipe your forehead. The sweat is gritty. Salt and sand mix together, forming a paste that works its way into every wrinkle and crevice like nature's exfoliating insult. Your mouth is dry, but you don't drink. You're rationing. Your last jug of water tastes like clay and frogs, but it's all you have until tomorrow's boil. You wonder what it would be like to stop, to walk away, to drop the sickle and the basket and the back pain and the ache and just go. But where? The next village has the same fields, the same sun, the same overseer, the same porridge made from beans that shouldn't legally be called food. So you stay, and you weed, and you dig, and you work like the Pharaoh's ghost is breathing down your neck. You're not a farmer, you're a cog a sunburnt, underfed cog turning in the machinery of empire, built to break. And the worst part, you're getting better at it. Your body has adapted to the misery. You can now carry twice the weight and complain half as often. They call that progress. You don't. You make it home. Not triumphantly. Not even consciously. You just sort of arrive, like a pebble finally rolling to the bottom of a slope. The door creaks open. Your body follows. Every step feels like someone else's bad decision echoing through your legs. Inside it's hot, still, somehow even hotter than the field, because at least the field had wind. Your home traps heat like a guilt offering to Ra. Your partner is already at work. Not resting, never resting. They're hunched over the hearth, blowing into a pile of burning dung trying to call itself a fire. They look up briefly. You exchange a glance that says everything. Yes, we're still alive. No, we don't know why. There's food to prepare, not cook, prepare. Because the term cooking implies agency, flavour, creativity. This is more like damage control with ingredients that actively want you dead. You sit on the floor next to the grinding stone. It's worn smooth from generations of people doing exactly this. Pushing grain into flour, hour after hour, until the muscles in your arms throb and your fingers blister just from the vibration. The grain? Barley? Again, always barley. Barley that was stored in a clay jar that cracked last season and now leaks joy. Some of the kernels are mouldy. You pick out the worst ones. Leave the questionable ones in. Because waste is a luxury and stomach pain is just background noise now. You start grinding, stone against stone, dust rising with every circle. It gets in your nose, your eyes, your lungs. You cough. The flour keeps coming. You don't stop. Because you need enough to make bread for 6. And half of that bread will be eaten by children too young to appreciate how much effort went into their daily serving of edible punishment. The dough is simple. Flour, water. Whatever is left of your self-respect. You shape it into discs, not round, not perfect, just flat and fast. Your partner tosses them on a heated stone. They bubble at the edges, hiss slightly, and blacken within seconds. Not burnt, just done. While the bread cools, which takes exactly 4 seconds in this heat, you prepare the rest of the meal. A few onions, a jar of last week's lentils that have started to sprout, and a dried fish that smells like it has unresolved trauma. The lentils are boiled again, not to cook them, they're already mush, but to kill whatever they started becoming in the dark. The fish is scraped. You try to remove the worst of the rot. You fail. You cook it anyway. Because there is no expiration date in ancient Egypt. There is only, do you feel lucky? While it simmers, you tend to the children. One is sick, nothing specific, just tired, listless. Eyes dull like they've already accepted a life of gritty porridge and parental despair. Another is crying. Why? Who knows? Maybe hunger. Maybe thirst. Maybe they just noticed what the fish looks like. You hush them. You rock them. You whisper something calming. Then you get back to the food. Because if you stop for too long, you fall behind. And falling behind means eating less. And eating less means working worse. And working worse means punishment. The lentils are ready. The fish is no longer twitching. You scrape it into a shared bowl, praying no one finds a bone too sharp or a parasite too ambitious. You call everyone to eat. They come, silently. Not from excitement, from necessity. The meal begins. No one speaks. The children chew noisily. Your partner picks at the bread with the slow mechanical rhythm of someone who's just trying to finish before the next crisis. You eat last, not from nobility, from exhaustion. You chew a piece of bread that cracks when bitten. You dip it in the lentils. You chew again, and again, and again. It never gets better, just smaller. Your jaw aches. You swallow. You sigh. You think of milk. You think of fruit. You think of not being here. Then someone knocks over the fishbowl, and you stop thinking entirely. The mess is cleaned, poorly. The floor was already a mosaic of past spills and crushed insects. This just adds to the tapestry. Then it's time for the dishes. There are no plates, just bowls, cups, spoons, carved from bone or wood. You rinse them with stale water from a bucket you filled 3 days ago, and immediately forgot to respect. They don't come clean. They come less dirty, which is good enough. You wipe your hand on a cloth, so saturated with grease and soot that it's essentially laminated. You sit. Finally. But only for a moment, because there's still grain to store. Still tools to fix. Still children to scold. Laundry to beat against rocks. And firewood to beg from a neighbour who probably hates you as much as you hate them. Your partner yawns. You nod. It's the most romantic exchange you've had in weeks. Night falls. You lie down. The floor is hard. Your stomach is full, not satisfied, just filled. Like a bag of warm stones. You stare at the ceiling. You wonder if this is it. If this is all life will ever be. Bread, lentils, flies, and waiting for the next bad thing to happen. And deep down, you already know the answer. Yes, this is it. Let's say, purely hypothetically, you're not working the fields. You've been lucky enough to be trained in a trade. Maybe you weave. Maybe you fire clay pots. Maybe you haul limestone blocks for someone else's tomb. It doesn't matter. You still suffer, just in different shapes. Take weaving. You sit in a dark room, hunched over a crude loom. It's not ergonomic, it's not efficient. It's just 2 sticks and a prayer. You pull thread after thread through coarse fibres, over and under, again and again, until your fingers bleed. The thread is made from flax, spun into strands so rough they could file your teeth down if you flossed with them. And sometimes they do. There's no cushion under you. You sit on the ground, dirt floor, calloused legs folded into a shape invented purely to destroy your knees. Your back cramps. Your eyes blur, but the cloth grows, inches at a time. Every foot of linen a record of spinal trauma. You don't even keep the cloth. It's sold, traded, taxed, sometimes used to wrap mummified cats, which will eat better in the afterlife than you ever did alive. And what do you get? Bread? Maybe? Beer? Definitely. Not because it's good. Because it's cheaper than clean water and dulls the part of your brain that still dreams of variety. Then there's pottery. You shape clay into bowls. Not because you love pottery. Because people need somewhere to store their millet and disappointment. The clay comes from the Nile. You dig it up with your hands, mix it with sand, your own sweat. Sometimes your blood, if the sharp tools get snippy. You mould it, spin it. Your knees control the wheel. Your hands keep the shape. Your posture abandons you halfway through. Then comes firing. You bake your creation in a kiln made of bricks and soot and generations of carbon build-up. It's hot. It's always hot. You sweat so much you could fill one of your own pots. You inhale smoke all day, every day. Your lungs become chimneys. Your throat becomes a gravel path. The final result? Bowls, cups, jars, slightly lopsided, covered in soot, sometimes cracked, good enough to sell. Or at least trade. And what do you trade for? Food. Same food, always the same food, bread that breaks teeth, beer that breaks wind, stew that breaks trust. Now imagine you're a builder. You're not just working, you're being broken in. You haul limestone blocks that weigh more than your entire family, with ropes, with sweat, with the power of peer pressure and unpaid labour. Your tools are wooden sleds, bronze chisels, and whatever body part hasn't given out yet. You work from sunup to sundown, unless the pharaoh dies, in which case you work longer. The foreman watches you like a vulture in sandals. If you slack, you're beaten. If you cry, you're laughed at. If you collapse, you're replaced. The food on these jobs? Better. Slightly. Because dead workers slow down progress. So they feed you just enough to keep you standing. Not well fed, just not quite dead. You eat in groups. Bread passed around like a sacred object. Beer ladled from clay vats like warm soup, only chunkier. Maybe a handful of dried dates, if someone bribed the foreman or stole from an offering plate. You chew, you swallow, you burp, you keep hauling, your muscles grow, but so do the cracks in your bones. You wake up sore, you go to sleep sore. Eventually you stop noticing. Sometimes you help build tombs, massive structures for people you'll never meet, monuments to lives you'll never understand. And you carve their names in stone, with fingers that have never held a scroll, with arms that will never rest, with a belly that's still waiting for a meal worth remembering. There are other trades, of course. Leather workers who spend their days elbow deep in animal skins, tanners who smell like permanent failure, metal workers who play with fire and then suffer the consequences on their own skin, brewers who taste their product more often than they should. And who can blame them? They all work, not for wealth, not for fame, not even for joy, just for calories. Because everything in ancient Egypt is about feeding yourself before the work kills you. That's the goal. Not happiness, not stability, not progress, just survival. Barely. And maybe some lentils if you're lucky. And the worst part? You do all of this knowing that the food you're buying, baking, or bartering for isn't even good. It's the same thing every day. Bread, beer, stew, repeat. No variety, no seasoning, no surprise, just hunger management. And when your body finally gives out, when your back seizes, or your hands stiffen into claws, or your lungs fill with soot, you don't get a pension. You don't get a send-off. You just stop, and someone else takes your place. Because there's always someone hungrier than you. The sun is lower now. Not gentle, just slanted. Its heat no longer presses down from above. It comes sideways, like a slow-moving slap to the soul. You're almost done working. Almost. Which is to say, you're about to stop one kind of labour and start another. There is no end of day. There is only the brief pause between burning daylight and pitch-black darkness, where you scramble to maintain the illusion of control. You haul your body home. Not walk, haul, one step at a time. Like dragging a broken wheelbarrow full of bones that used to be ambitions. Your skin stings. Your mouth is dry. Your knees have taken on a new shape. Not medical, abstract. Every movement hurts. Your arms feel like they belong to someone else. Someone who gave up yesterday but forgot to mention it. At home, the work continues. More grain to grind, more water to boil, more cooking, more cleaning, more pretending. Your partner is sitting in the corner, eyes glassy, working a spindle between fingers that are cracked and bleeding. They don't look up. They don't need to. You both already know how this day ends. You pick up a bowl. It has crusted lentils stuck to the bottom. Not yesterday's, not last week's. Just always. You scrub it with a rag that used to be linen. Now it's more philosophy than fabric. The lentils come loose eventually, or you decide they did. Good enough. You check the jar of beer. Still there. Still warm. Still thick. You pour a bit into a cup made from a broken bowl's better half. You sip. It tastes like everything you've already swallowed today. You offer some to your partner. They nod. Not thanks, just acknowledgement. Your children sleep nearby, sprawled across the floor like dropped laundry. One has a swollen belly, the other sunken cheeks. Both of them breathing, which is a win, for now. You sit by the fire. The coals glow faintly, exhausted from the effort of staying alive. Much like you. There's nothing left to cook. Just a few chunks of stale bread. You break one in half. Your teeth hesitate. Your stomach does not. You chew slowly. Each bite echoes through your skull like a warning bell. You swallow hard. You don't taste anything. You haven't tasted anything in weeks. Food in ancient Egypt doesn't nourish. It delays collapse. It keeps you vertical. Barely. It's never enough. It's never good. It's just there, like the sun, the sand, and the slow unravelling of your body. Your head tilts back. You stare at the ceiling. Dust falls into your eyes. You don't blink. You think of stopping. Not dramatically. Just quietly. No more grinding. No more hauling. No more chewing through gravel and calling it bread. But you don't stop. Because that's not how this works. Stopping isn't a decision. It's something your body does when it finally runs out of compromises. You look at your hands. Calloused. Split. Covered in tiny white scars. From years of cooking, cutting, lifting, burning. You flex your fingers. They fight back. Your joints click in protest. Your skin stretches, barely. These are not the hands of a survivor. They are the hands of someone who has been surviving too long. Outside, someone yells. You don't react. Yelling is a background noise, like the wind, like flies, like failure. Your partner finally speaks. They say one word, enough. You nod. Not agreement, just recognition. Because the word enough has stopped meaning anything specific. Enough pain? Enough hunger? Enough working? Enough pretending this is normal? Yes. And no. Always both. The room darkens. The fire dies. You lie down. Your mat is still warm from earlier. The sweat hasn't dried. Your limbs fall into place like a pile of discarded tools. You don't fall asleep. You drift sideways into a mental fog where time doesn't pass. It just leaks. You dream of food, not feasts, just good bread. Soft, warm, chewable, digestible. You dream of water. Cold, clear, without things living in it, without bits, without guilt. You dream of sitting, just sitting. No task in your hands. No weight on your shoulders. No deadline in the form of starvation. You know the dreams won't come true, but you still have them, because that's the only part of you that doesn't have blisters. The room is silent now, except for your breath, your heartbeat, the faint sound of your stomach trying to plan its next act of rebellion. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Not because you want to, not because you're strong, just because the alternative is worse. This is the labour of ancient Egypt, not noble, not glorious, just constant. You don't live to work. You don't even work to live. You work so you don't die immediately, so you can eat something, so you can feel full for 5 minutes, so you can dream. And tomorrow you'll wake up hungry, just like today, and the day before. And every day until your body finally doesn't. You were born low, not metaphorically, literally. Your cradle was a wicker basket on a dirt floor, shared with goats, grain, and your older brother's pet scorpion. You've never seen the inside of a noble's house, but you've smelled it. Once. When the wind shifted just right during a feast day and carried over the scent of meat, honey, and other things you thought were made up by bored priests. That's how you learned your place. Not through schooling, not through ceremony, through smell. Your meals are defined by your status, which is another word for how close you are to being completely ignored by society. Let's break it down. At the top, Pharaoh, the living god. He eats gold. Not literally, but almost. Roasted meats, honey-soaked pastries. Figs so fresh they weep nectar when bitten. His bread is soft. His beer is filtered. His wine is imported. He doesn't touch porridge unless it's laced with cinnamon and the tears of foreign tribute. Just below him, the nobility, priests, high officials, temple bureaucrats who get nosebleeds if they walk on sand. They dine daily on goose, lamb, cakes, dried fruit, dates, and things spiced with ingredients worth more than your house. They have servants who wash their hands between courses. They have bread that doesn't crumble into gravel. They have plates, not shared bowls. And yes, sometimes they eat with their fingers, but only to be charming. Then there are scribes, educated, literate, not exactly noble, but high enough that they get 2 servings of lentils, and their beer comes in sealed jars. They write about the harvest. They don't do the harvest. And that makes all the difference. After that, the artisans and tradesmen. People who make things the rich use once and throw away. Potters, weavers, carvers, metalworkers. They get decent bread. Sometimes pickled fish. If their work is good, they might get paid in food. Slightly better food than you, which still isn't saying much. Then there's you, the labourers, the field hands, the stone haulers, the reed cutters, the drainage ditch diggers. Your meals are a civic afterthought. Your diet is barley, with a side of barley, washed down with barley-based beer. Protein? Sure, once a month, if a goat dies and no one important claims the corpse. Fat? Only what naturally leaks out of an onion when it's been boiled for 6 hours. Flavour? Absolutely not. The bread you eat is so coarse it comes with a dental warning. It was ground on stone, baked on ash, and occasionally flavoured with sand that blew in from the open doorway. And if you think that's bad, there's worse. Some days you don't even get the bad bread. You get what nobles didn't finish. Scraps from temple offerings. The remains of food left to rot in the sun beside a statue while a priest chants about divine eternity. You eat that. Food blessed for a god and abandoned to the flies. You scrape off the mould. You pretend the fig wasn't chewed already. You eat fast before someone more desperate shows up. In lean times, even that's too generous. You get broth, made from yesterday's water, thickened with today's sadness, served warm because it sat in the sun while you worked. You eat in the dirt, on your knees, bowed whether you mean to or not, sometimes because of respect, mostly because your back hurts too much to sit upright. The rich drink wine, not in excess, publicly, but they sip it from imported cups, chilled in cool rooms. Their lips never touch anything that hasn't been wiped first by someone with fewer rights than a domesticated cat. You drink beer. Warm, unfiltered, cloudy. Stored in jars covered with cloth and hope. You sip around the floating chunks like it's normal, because it is. For you. They eat off trays, with metal knives, ceremonial forks, with music, with conversation. You eat out of a shared bowl with hands you didn't wash. Why? Because water is scarce. And soap is a rumour. They sit on stools, on cushions, on shaded balconies. You crouch on your haunches in the sun. Balance your meal on a flat stone. Fight off ants. Swat away flies. And consider it a blessing. You are constantly aware that someone else is eating better than you. Not just richer. Cleaner. Their food is polished. Their drinks are filtered. Their herbs are imported. Your herbs, probably weeds. Your spices, ash. Sometimes nobles host feasts. You're invited as labour. You carry in the wine. You pour it. You mop up what's spilled. You watch from the doorway as roast duck is sliced with a knife sharper than your sickle. You smell the cinnamon. You see the honey dripping from cakes you will never touch. You hear laughter over a second course while your stomach performs theatre in your abdomen. And then you leave. You don't get leftovers. You get memory fragments. And maybe a discarded chicken bone if a guest didn't gnaw it clean. Even the way you cook depends on your class. The rich have kitchens, separate rooms, servants, fires that don't make the whole house unlivable. You cook over open flames in a room smaller than your own grave. You burn your hands. You burn your bread. You breathe in more smoke than a funeral pyre. They store food in cool cellars. You store it under a pot lid and pray it doesn't hatch something. They season their food. You salt yours, if you're lucky, with the sweat dripping off your forehead. And worst of all, you're expected to be grateful. Grateful for your porridge, your beer, your weekly onion. Grateful that the system feeds you at all. Because if you complain, if you even hint that life might be better with softer bread or fewer weevils, you're scolded, laughed at, or reminded, loudly, that not starving is a privilege, and you believe them. Because you've seen what starvation looks like. You've seen your neighbours boil reeds. You've seen children chew on clay. You've seen someone try to ferment mashed fish bones into soup. You've eaten that soup twice, and you will again. Because in ancient Egypt, what you eat doesn't just fill your stomach. It defines your worth, your rank, your future, and your food says you are replaceable. Food, in ancient Egypt, isn't just about calories. It's ceremony. It's politics. It's performance art for the gods, the pharaoh, and the entire stratified system that keeps you exactly where you are, at the bottom of the edible ladder, gnawing on mouldy rungs. The temples are the worst offenders. From the outside, they look majestic. Colossal gates, towering obelisks, white limestone shining in the sun. Inside, suffering, but it smells incredible. On any given day, temple kitchens are filled with offerings being prepared. Roast goose, sweet cakes, honey-glazed fruit, jars of wine, salted fish, rich bread shaped like animals, sacred herbs, and an entire day's worth of what you're not allowed to eat. You help bring it in. You're part of the labour force that carries crates of offerings into a place where no one says thank you. Not the priests, not the gods, not your growling stomach. You enter carrying a basket of figs that are so ripe they make your mouth water before you're halfway across the courtyard. You set it down in front of a statue, a god of fertility, a god of agriculture, a god who looks like they're smirking because they know you haven't eaten yet today. The food is arranged in neat rows, polished, blessed, displayed like a royal wedding feast. You're not sure who's inspecting it. The deity? The priest? The flies? Either way, it's not you. The offerings sit there for hours, sometimes days. The food rots gracefully under the sun, shrivels, softens, sours. but you're not allowed to touch it until it's spiritually exhausted. That's the official term. It means the god has absorbed the essence. What's left? Up for grabs. And guess who gets first pick? The priests. They live well. Not pharaoh level, but comfortably. Multiple meals a day. Private gardens. Access to honey. Clean utensils. Actual seasoning. They even have servants. People lower on a sacred food chain who cook their blessed leftovers into fresh meals. Stews, breads, even stews inside breads, which sounds like luxury until you realise it's just a way to hide how old the ingredients are. When they're full, and only then, the rest gets passed down. To scribes, to guards, to trusted labourers. Not you. You're what's known as distant access. It means if there's a crust of bread no one wants, if the fish head is still intact, if someone drops a grape and it rolls under a statue, maybe you get to clean it up with your mouth. You've seen priests toss an entire plate of uneaten food into the dirt beside the altar, not out of wastefulness, out of ritual precision. That's your chance. You wait until no one's watching. Then you shuffle over and pretend to be adjusting a mat. Your fingers close around a half-eaten cake. Sticky, crumbly. You glance around, then take a bite. It's sweet. So sweet it hurts. Your jaw freezes. Your throat panics. You haven't tasted sugar in months. You chew slowly. Savour it. And then someone catches you. You're scolded. Not for stealing, but for defiling the protocol. That food was meant for the divine, not some peasant with mud on their feet and fungus under their nails. You don't argue, you bow, you apologise, you finish the bite behind a pillar. That's the temple food chain. Gods, priests, priests' cousins, goats, the ground, you. And if you think that's unfair, it is. But it's also enforced by ritual law, economic law, and stone walls 3 feet thick. Even funerals have a hierarchy of taste. If you're rich and dead, you get embalmed, wrapped, placed in a tomb, and fed on your way to the afterlife. Offerings are made: goose, bread, wine, fruit, cake, all carefully placed in your burial chamber. You don't eat it, obviously. You're dead. But someone does. The tomb workers. You've heard the stories. Men sneaking bites of burial offerings while sealing the tomb. A swig of wine here, a fig there, a nibble of honey bread offered for the soul. They're not stealing. They're participating in the ritual, which is how you excuse grave snacking in a theocracy. And what do the poor get when they die? Maybe a shared grave. Maybe a hole in the sand. Maybe a bowl of lentils placed beside them quickly before the rats claim it. Even in death, your food is worse than everyone else's. But the priests don't care. They bless the bread. They anoint the goose. They say words over the wine. And you, still alive, still hungry, still breathing in incense and onion sweat, are left to sweep up the crumbs of eternal luxury. In a temple, food is about symbolism, abundance, respect, divine order. In your life, food is about staying upright long enough to carry someone else's offerings. You eat in the shadows of statues carved from stone, so expensive it could have fed your entire family for a year. But instead, it got shaped into a god who doesn't speak and watches you starve. That's not irony, that's religion with a catering budget. And if one day you die in the temple, maybe from heat, maybe from hunger, maybe from slipping on a fig, your body will be dragged out and tossed in the sand, and the offerings will continue. Fresh goose, fresh bread, fresh wine. Because gods never go hungry. Only you do. You've heard it said that food is life. In ancient Egypt, that's not true. Here, food is permission. It's a system of rewards. an instrument of control. A currency you don't carry in your hand, but in your body, in the way your ribs show when the harvest is bad, or your spine curves when the rations are light. It starts with the state. Your food is not guaranteed. It's assigned, measured, logged on papyrus scrolls by men who have never planted a seed in their life. You don't own your field. You work a plot that belongs to the temple, or to a noble, or to a faceless bureaucracy with more seals than sympathy. You harvest the grain, you pile it up, and then you give it away. To them. You keep a fraction, if you're lucky, if the Nile didn't flood too much, or too little, or at the wrong time, or in the wrong mood. And then, once your share is taken, your rations are handed back to you, like an allowance for a child who's misbehaved. Your family gets weighed portions of grain, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the scribe decides. Sometimes you get dried fish, if it's owed. Sometimes lentils, if you grovel politely and your scribe isn't hungover. You line up, you wait, the sun beats down. The people ahead of you mumble, shovel forward, bow. You reach the front. The scribe glances at you, then at his chart. He scribbles something, then points at a small pile of barley and a half-rotten onion. That's yours. No explanation. No negotiation. Just barley, an onion, and the silent assumption that you'll say thank you. If you protest, you get skipped, or worse, demoted. The rationing system is delicate, intentionally so. It's not just about distributing food, it's about proving your place. The scribe is above you. The official who pays the scribe is above him. The temple is above everyone. And at the top is Pharaoh, who has never eaten a meal with a worm in it and never will. But you? You're a body in a line, a number in ink. And if you twitch the wrong way, your ration becomes a punishment. You've seen it happen. A man in your village raised his voice once, just once, because his jar of lentils was infested, and the beer smelled like dead frogs. He was marked as disruptive. Next week, his family's barley was cut in half. The week after that, they received none. The week after that, his name disappeared from the scroll. No one asked questions, because they wanted to stay on the list. You learn not to speak, not to blink too loudly, not to frown when your ration contains bugs. You go home, you grind grain, you sift out the ants, you pretend your beer is fermented boldly, and you eat. Because complaining doesn't just starve you, it starves your children. The ration system punishes independence. If you grow your own food, say some onions behind your house, you're still taxed on it. If you catch fish on your own time, it's considered hoarding if not reported. If you trade bread for figs, you're a black market risk. If you succeed, you're accused of theft. They want you just hungry enough to obey. Full stomachs ask questions. Empty ones bow lower. And when disaster hits, when the flood fails, or the insects win, or the temple reassesses its priorities, guess who gets cut first? Not the priests. Not the officials. Not even the scribes. You, the state, sends word that rations will be reduced. They call it temporary. It isn't. You receive a third of the grain. Your bread shrinks. Your stew stretches thin. Your bones push through your skin like polite reminders of mortality. You keep working. You keep paying tax. You keep bowing. Because you still believe that if you just endure this, if you just survive long enough, it'll get better. It doesn't. Sometimes your punishment isn't just quiet. Sometimes it's public. You've seen it. A woman caught taking an extra onion from the ration pile, dragged to the centre of the village, hands tied. Food dumped at her feet, spoiled, black with rot. They made her eat it, slowly, while everyone watched. To remind you that food is not a right, it is a gift. From the state, from the gods. From men with scrolls and sandals too clean to trust. Another time, a boy stole a handful of dates from a noble's cart. He was stripped, lashed, and made to chant a prayer of apology to the tree the dates came from. No one intervened. Everyone watched and silently memorized the limits of hunger. You've dreamed about food so vividly, you woke up chewing your own tongue. But you never steal, because you know what happens. And even when you do everything right, sometimes it's not enough. A scribe has a bad day. A priest wants to make an example. An official wants to cut costs. Suddenly your ration drops. You ask why. They say, there is no record of you receiving more. The implication? You're lucky to eat at all. And they're right. You are lucky. Lucky you weren't born further south, where the land is harsher. Lucky you weren't taken by the draft and marched into Nubia. Lucky you have hands that still work and teeth that still grind. Mostly. You think about that at night. Not the work, not the sun, not the pain, but the fear that tomorrow your name might not be on the scroll, that the portion you grind will be zero, that your children will ask, "What's for dinner?" And your answer will be a silence so loud it scars. So you wake up, you go to the line, you bow, you smile, and you say thank you for the barley. You were taught not to expect more. Not by a teacher, not by a law, but by life. By the way your father handed you a chipped clay bowl with half a date in it and said, "This is enough." By the way your mother rationed onions like they were artifacts. By the way your older brother got sick from bad bread and everyone called it normal. By the way you learned that full stomachs are not for people like you. This is not just poverty. This is programmed humility. Humility as a practice, as an institution, as a meal plan. You were raised to believe you weren't hungry, just undeserving. That your stomach growled not from injustice, but from your own unworthiness. That you hadn't earned better bread. That you hadn't served enough to deserve honey. That someone, somewhere, was being tested harder. And they, not you, would receive the reward. You grow up with this. You internalize it. You look at a nobleman's meal. Roasted duck, boiled eggs, soft dates, crisp lettuce soaked in oil. And you think, I wouldn't even know what to do with that. Because you wouldn't. You'd flinch. You'd drop the plate. You'd chew slowly, not for savouring, but because you're afraid the food will disappear before you finish. You don't fantasize about luxury. You fantasize about enough. Just enough. A second helping. A full mug. A bowl with more food than flies. But even those dreams begin to feel inappropriate. You hear about a family in the next village who are caught hiding a jar of figs during tax season. The punishment? Everything taken. Even the roof from their home. Public shaming. A sign hung around the father's neck. Hoarder of the harvest. They walked with their heads down for weeks, as if their mistake was not the theft, but the audacity to want more. It gets into you. That quiet guilt. That twitch in your gut every time you feel satisfied. Because full bellies mean suspicion. Full bellies mean eyes watching. Full bellies mean you must have taken what wasn't yours. So you learn how to starve properly. Gracefully, modestly. You eat smaller bites. You tell your children the bread is dense, not stale. You say things like, "We're lucky to have anything at all," even when you know it's not true. You watch the priests eat from a distance. You see the plates stacked with roasted fish and duck fat dripping onto polished limestone floors. You watch a boy, maybe 12, toss a boiled quail egg over his shoulder and laugh, and you flinch like it hit you, because you would have caught it. You would have eaten it whole, shell and all, and said thank you. Time passes, years blur, meals repeat, bread, beer, onion, bread, beer, rot. You stop expecting change, you stop noticing hunger. Eventually, you become what they always wanted you to be, quiet. You go to the ration line without speaking, you eat without flavour, you work without pause, you sleep without dreams. Your bones still ache, but now you just accept them as part of your body. Your stomach still growls, but now you just laugh at it, softly, like an old friend showing up late. And when someone asks you, how's your food lately? You say, it's enough. Because you don't remember how to say it's not. Because you're not even sure if it's allowed. One day your child turns to you. They're thin, but happy, playing with a reed toy someone carved from a broken basket. They ask, is it true the gods eat honey every day? You smile. You nod. They ask, why don't we? You pause. Because you could lie. You could say, they need it more than we do. You could say, they earned it. You could say, it's not for us. But you don't. You look your child in the eye, and you say, because they were born above us. And that's it. That's the whole explanation. That's the whole system. That's the whole truth no one ever says out loud. Your child frowns, but nods, because they've already started learning. And someday they'll pass it on. They'll hand their own child a chipped bowl with half a date in it, and they'll say, this is enough. And that child will believe them, not because it's true, but because in ancient Egypt, hunger is inheritance. It's not a phase, it's a caste, a rite of passage, a cultural identity carved deeper than any tomb inscription. And the shame that comes with wanting more than you're allowed, it becomes a second skin. You wear it so long, you forget it wasn't yours to begin with. In ancient Egypt, the gods were always watching, not metaphorically, not spiritually, not symbolically, literally watching. Carved into walls, painted across ceilings, perched in every corner of every temple, wide, unblinking eyes, eyes of Horus, eyes of Ra, eyes of gods you couldn't name even if your life depended on it. And sometimes it did. They watched you wake up, watched you grind your grain, watched you boil your lentils into something legally classified as edible. They even watched you eat, because eating was an act of worship, or an offence, or both. What you ate, how you ate, when you ate, and where you ate, all of it was tangled up in ritual, law, and invisible authority. You didn't just have a meal, you participated in cosmic balance. According to the priests, and you never questioned the priests, food was a reflection of Ma'at. Ma'at, the divine order, truth, justice, harmony, a concept so broad and vague it could mean anything, especially if the right person was holding a scroll while saying it. If you ate too much, you disturbed Ma'at. If you ate too little, you dishonoured your role. If you asked why a god needed 12 roasted geese and a mountain of dates every morning, you were dangerously close to heresy. The temple scribes had entire volumes dedicated to what foods pleased which gods. Ra liked onions. Thoth liked bread with oil. Hathor preferred wine, sweet things, and the kind of sensual snacks you could only dream about. Osiris got everything. Fruits, vegetables, meats, incense. Because he was in charge of the afterlife, and everyone wants to keep that guy happy. And when the gods were fed, the people were supposed to be fed too, in theory. In practice, you fed the gods, and then watched as their priests carried the leftovers into their private quarters, shut the door, and pretended to meditate. You were never allowed to see it, but you knew. Behind the sanctuaries, beyond the incense halls, were feasting rooms. Not holy spaces, private ones, where high-ranking priests, the mouths of the gods, sat around platters of offering food and dined in silence, or laughter, or smug satisfaction. These were men who claimed the food wasn't for them, that they were simply vessels, conduits, administrators of divine digestion. But you saw the oil stains on their robes. You saw the crumbs on their scrolls. You saw the roast goose bones behind the temple stables. They were eating offerings and calling it sacred duty. Meanwhile, you boiled the same onions 3 times to make soup thick enough to chew. The priests didn't just enforce divine will, they interpreted it. They were the ones who told you, this week, no fish, the river is mourning, or barley must be sacrificed to appease Sekhmet, and by sacrificed we mean donated to the temple and never seen again. They decided what was pure, what was forbidden, what was clean enough to serve the gods, and what was fit for your mouth. You once saw a man punished for baking bread on the wrong day, not because the bread was bad, but because he forgot to face the sun while kneading it. The loaf was seized, declared ritually impure, crushed into pieces, fed to dogs. You weren't sure which part of that honoured the gods, but the priest explained that it restored balance, which is the word they always used when something pointless and humiliating happened. There were rules, endless rules, about who could touch food, who could cook it, what kind of wood could be used in the oven, what prayers had to be said before boiling lentils, which days you were allowed to eat garlic, and which days it offended the divine nasal cavity. Even eating bread was a ritual. You couldn't just bite into it. You had to break it, with both hands, while facing a specific direction, depending on which god's day it was. And if you were impure, touched a corpse, argued with a superior, stepped in sacred dung, you couldn't eat at all. Not until you were cleansed. Which involved waiting outside the temple for 6 hours, bathing in cold water, reciting a prayer 42 times, and possibly sacrificing a beetle, or a goat, or a very symbolic handful of barley. You once watched your cousin go 3 days without food because he forgot he'd touched a pig he didn't even see, just a patch of dirt a priest later declared had been visited by one. No one argued, because arguing made you more impure, so he fasted, and thanked the priest for the reminder, while shaking. The rules didn't stop with the living, the dead ate too, or so they said. You were expected to place food in tombs. Every burial had its menu, not written in ink, carved in stone. The belief was this: the car, the soul, would consume the spiritual essence of food left behind, so you'd spend days preparing tomb offerings, jars of beer, loaves of bread, smoked fish, preserved fruits, honey, wine, and after the funeral, priests would come back, collect the still fresh offerings, and redistribute them. You never knew where they went, but you were told, do not question it, the gods recycle. And so the dead got better food than the living, because the gods might be watching. And you didn't want to offend a hungry spirit, especially if that spirit used to own your house. In ancient Egypt, belief wasn't separate from your plate. It was your plate. It told you what was allowed, who was clean, why your food was always just slightly too sacred for you to eat, and how your hunger, your low, growling physical need, could be explained, excused, or erased by people in robes who said they spoke for the sky. And if it didn't make sense, that was your fault, not the systems, not the gods, not the temple. You just weren't spiritually ready to understand. So you chewed your crust, you sipped your thick beer, and you whispered, "Thank you for balance." The festival is coming. You hear it first, not from the priests, or the nobles, or the scribe who hasn't smiled since the last eclipse, but from the children. They run through the streets shouting names of gods they don't understand. Hathor, Sekhmet, Osiris. They've been told they're about to see music, incense, feasting. They don't know that none of it is for them. The Festival of the Valley, one of the biggest. A time to unite the living and the dead. A celebration of resurrection, fertility, and all things allegedly joyful. On papyrus, anyway. In reality, it's a logistical nightmare for the poor. Especially you. The festival calendar says it's a time of sharing. A time when the gods feast, and so do the people. That's the theory. That's what the high priests say during their public declarations. Let all hearts rejoice. Let no home go hungry. You laugh when you hear it, because you've lived through this before. You know how it works. The temple begins preparations weeks in advance. Oxen are slaughtered. Geese are plucked. Bread is baked by the hundred. Figs are packed into palm baskets. Wine is stirred in vats taller than you. And every time you walk past the procession halls, the smell of roasting meat slaps your face like a wealthy uncle, reminding you who's still in the will. It smells like heaven. It tastes like not yours. For you, the festival means more work, extra grain to be harvested in advance, extra taxes for sacred distribution, extra time spent sweeping temple floors, patching walls, carrying wine jars, arranging offerings, and being shouted at by someone who believes yelling purifies things. You do not get paid. You are told that this labour is a blessing, a spiritual honour. You should be grateful to be included. You're included the way a plank is included in a raft. Essential, replaceable, soaked. You sweat under sun and supervision. You prepare food you will not eat. You pour drinks you will not sip. You watch cakes being stacked into pyramids, and you're told not to breathe on them too hard. If you're lucky, you're given a bowl of porridge. Festival ration, they call it. Thinner than usual, but with a fig on top. Halved. Because you're worth it. The actual feast, the real feast, takes place inside the temple walls. The inner sanctum. A place you're not allowed to enter, unless you're a priest, a noble, or a god carved into the furniture. There, they eat the offerings. Not leftovers, not scraps. Offerings, the best, the first cuts, the golden loaves, the honeyed goose, the wine that smells like comfort and bad decisions. They call it blessed consumption. You call it watching your week's labour vanish into someone else's mouth. You catch glimpses through open doors. Tables loaded with dates, fish, cakes, roasted meat, and things you've only ever heard described in stories by old men who lie beautifully. You hear laughter, drums, the clink of cups, a chant sung off key because someone's had too much fig wine. You're invited to none of it, but you're invited to clean up. After the feast, you sweep. You carry away bones. You pour out half-drunk cups. You collect crumbs in baskets for redistribution. This is what they meant by sharing the divine table. If you've behaved, if your priest likes you, if no one more important wants seconds, You might get a scrap of meat, half a roll, a smear of honey still stuck to a plate. You don't ask questions. You lick the plate. You eat standing in the shade of the temple wall, away from the musicians, away from the nobles, away from the torchlight. Your child asks, "Why do they get the feast?" You say, "Because they speak to the gods." Your child frowns. "Can't we speak too?" You say nothing, because your mouth is full of cold duck skin and embarrassment. Later in the festival comes the procession. The sacred bark in the ceremonial boat is carried through the streets. Inside it, a statue of Amun, or Osiris, or whichever god the day demands, locked in a gilded box. People cheer, drums thunder, priests chant like they've never known exhaustion. The illusion? Unity. Everyone marching. Everyone watching. Everyone celebrating. But it's not real. You're not equal in the crowd. Your family is kept to the edges. Nobles sit on platforms, shaded, fanned by servants. You stand behind them, sweating, squinting, wondering if any of this matters to the statue inside the boat. You've seen the god before, once, briefly, in a storage room when someone forgot to close the door. It was wood, painted, eyes wide, face unmoving, no hunger, no joy, no knowledge of you. But here on festival day, people weep in front of it, beg it for rain, for fertility, for good health, for daily bread. You don't ask for any of those. You ask to be forgotten during ration season. Because that's safer. After the festival, there's always a dip. In spirits, in food, in patience. The temple stocks are empty. The priests are hung over on incense and indulgence. And your ration gets smaller. But you're told it's sacred. That your sacrifice sustained the gods. That the world is more in balance now. That your hard work preserved divine order. You return to your hut with one piece of dried fig wrapped in old cloth. You divide it between 4 people. You chew slowly, and your stomach grumbles in rhythm with the drum beats still echoing from the hills. You once had a dream about a table, long, wooden, perfectly carved, laden with steaming loaves, salted fish, figs, beer so clear it looked like melted sunlight. At the head of the table sat a man with the head of a jackal. He beckoned you to sit. You reached for the bread. He bared his teeth. You woke up sweating, hungry, terrified. The next day you told no one, because you knew what dreams could do in Egypt. Dreams were sacred. Messages from the gods. Warnings. Punishments. Edicts disguised as bedtime hallucinations. There were priests whose sole job was dream interpretation. You paid them in offerings, or favours, and they told you what your own mind meant. If you dreamed of eating well, it could be a sign of divine favour, or greed, or a test. If you dreamed of forbidden food, pork, unclean fish, offerings meant for the gods, that was worse. You could be labelled ritually impure, tainted, untrustworthy, and your ration could be cut. Not because you did something wrong, but because your subconscious showed you trying. You once knew a man named Hapu, hard worker, kept his head down. He had a dream where he stole honey cakes from a funerary altar. He laughed about it, told his friend. His friend told someone else. 3 days later, a priest felt disturbed energy around him. And just like that, Hapu was removed from the grain list. No charges, no crime, just a dream. You never saw him again. Food wasn't just blessed, it was cursed. You didn't just avoid certain foods because they were unavailable. You avoided them because someone, somewhere, declared them evil. Fish from a bad section of the Nile? Tainted by the sins of a nearby town. Garlic on certain days? Could anger Bastet? Leftover lentils from funerary rites? May contain the wandering core of an unresolved soul. And if your meal happened to include one of these things, you didn't just throw it out, you buried it, with prayers, and apologies, and a small offering of beer, if you could spare it. Sometimes the priest would insist you burn it, which in practice meant you will now go without food for the day to honour the gods. You did it, because the alternative wasn't starvation, it was spiritual infection. Illness was never random. If you got sick after eating, stomach pain, fever, vomiting, it wasn't spoiled food. It was a sign. Someone had angered a god. Maybe you. Maybe your neighbour. Maybe a distant cousin who forgot to pay temple tax. Didn't matter. The food had been corrupted, touched by Sekhmet's fury. You had to cleanse it. Or worse, cleanse yourself. You were once forced to fast for 7 days because a priest declared your family stew cursed. Why? Because your grandmother used a wooden spoon from a funeral preparation hut. It didn't matter that it was clean, or that no one knew it had come from there. The priest sniffed, declared the energy wrong, and you went hungry while your uncle sacrificed a chicken and smeared its blood on the cooking pots. That's how you protect your soul, by going without. Children were raised on food superstitions. You were told never to leave bread upside down. It would invite famine. You were told never to whistle while grinding grain. You'd offend Min, god of fertility, and your crops would fail. You were told never to chew loudly. The spirits of the dead might hear you and demand a share. And if you broke these rules, the food would betray you. Your stew would curdle. Your bread would burn. Your beer would taste like vinegar, even if it didn't. Fear became flavour. You began to taste guilt, regret, dread. Every bite came with a calculation. Is this allowed? Is this blessed? Is this safe? You'd chew slowly, wait for divine approval. And sometimes you'd stop eating halfway through. Not because you were full, but because you weren't sure if the gods had said yes. The priests had systems, charts, signs. Days of the week matched to planetary forces, matched to dietary law, matched to what was left in the granary. They'd cast lots over your stew and declare it either approved or unfit. You'd accept the result, no matter what it was. A girl you knew once brought figs to a local priest for blessing. He looked at them, smelled them, declared them possessed by envy. She buried them in a clay jar, wept over them, didn't eat figs again for years. You don't ask questions when food becomes haunted. You just lower your eyes and keep chewing what's allowed. Wanting food outside your station wasn't just greedy, it was blasphemous. You wanted honey? You were trying to imitate royalty. You wanted fish every day? You were rejecting your place in the sacred social balance. You wanted something new? You were attempting to rewrite divine law. They told you, hunger builds humility. Fullness invites arrogance. You believed it. You still do. Because even when food was scarce, one thing was always in abundance: fear. There is a woman in your village. Her name is Satya. She's older, lives alone, walks with a limp that's never been explained. No one eats with her. Not because she's cruel, not because she's strange, because once her husband died on a festival day, and she touched his body before visiting the temple. That was years ago, but the label stuck. Impure. She tried to purify herself, offered incense, beer, grain, even shaved her head. But no priest ever certified her as clean again. So she eats alone. Not because she must, but because she was taught to believe no one should sit near her bread. In ancient Egypt, purity wasn't just a virtue, it was a status filter. Some were born clean, some stayed clean through rituals, some fell from it, through death, illness, accident, or accusation. Once impure, your access to food changed. You could no longer handle temple offerings. You couldn't touch shared pots. You couldn't be seen in the communal line. People would glance at you sideways, talk in riddles, wash their hands after you passed, and you, ashamed, starving, confused, would eventually believe them. You'd step back, eat later, eat alone, eat less. Not because they told you to, because you felt you had to. Imagine this. A shared meal in your village. A wide pot of lentil stew. Some bread passed around. Cups of beer served from a cracked jar. Laughter. Children playing in the dust. But someone notices. You're bleeding. A small cut on your finger. From work. Barely noticeable. A priest's apprentice sees it, says nothing, but stands. Everyone follows. They move away. The stew goes untouched. The bread discarded. The beer poured out. You're left holding your bowl. Still hungry. Now shamefully so. You offer to leave. No one says yes. No one says no. But when you return the next night, there is no invitation. You sit 5 feet away. Eat your own portion in silence. Because purity is contagious. And impurity is exile. After a while, no one has to warn you. You start asking, was this bread touched by a menstruating woman? Was this lentil boiled in a vessel used for funerals? Did I speak poorly of a priest this morning? Did I walk past a pig? You don't know the answers, so you don't eat, not today. Not until you've prayed. Not until the fear dissolves. Not until someone else tastes it first. You get thinner, but not because of famine, because of vigilance. Because the gods don't need to punish you. You've learned how to do it yourself. You no longer crave flavour. You crave permission. You want to hear a priest say, this is good, this is clean, you may eat. Even when the food is sour. Even when the bread crumbles like gravel. Even when the stew tastes like ash. If someone blesses it, you call it divine. If someone shames it, you spit it out. Not because your body knows, but because your soul has been trained. You have eaten belief so long, you cannot tell it apart from the food. You taste obedience. You chew ritual. You swallow hierarchy. You fast not from scarcity, but from fear that every bite will undo the little purity you still pretend to have. Years pass, you get older, slower, quieter. Your meals shrink. Your body fades, but the fear doesn't. You offer your grandson a piece of bread. He hesitates. Not because he's rude, but because he saw you speak to Satya last week. He asks, is this bread pure? You freeze, because you don't know. Because purity doesn't exist anymore, only the rules around it. You lie. You say yes. He eats it, slowly, carefully, like it might still bite him back. And you understand. Even when the food is gone, the fear stays. Because in ancient Egypt, you don't just eat. You submit. You cleanse. You prove. And then you chew. You're not afraid of hunger anymore. You're afraid of what's left when hunger gives up. You're afraid of the meat that twitches when it shouldn't. Of the bread that smells alive. Of the jug of beer with a layer that moves independently of the liquid beneath it. You've seen food rot faster than it should. Seen an entire offering of fish swell and burst before the midday prayer. Watched geese go from sacred to septic in the time it takes a priest to finish reciting an offering hymn. The climate is not kind to storage. The sun bakes your food while you're still walking it home. You wrap bread in leaves, clay, baskets or cloth. Doesn't matter. By morning it smells like whetstone and regret. By afternoon it smells like death. But you still eat it. Not because it's edible. Because it's there. And that's enough. Until it's not. You once bit into a fig and found a colony. Not metaphorically. A literal living nest. Wriggling white things, pulsing like spoiled honey. You spat it out and cried. Then ate another fig from the same basket, slower this time, hoping that whatever was inside would be smaller than your guilt. Everyone does it. Everyone knows. It's the thing you don't say during ration season, that the food you eat might kill you before the famine does, that the mould you scrape off is only the part you can see, that some gods accept fermented offerings, and some gods just accept whatever hasn't exploded yet. You remember the duck? It was a gift. An actual duck. Dead, fresh, already plucked. Left on your doorstep by a visiting merchant who owed your cousin a favour. You hadn't seen meat in weeks. You cried. Then you noticed the smell. Subtle. Like warm copper. You cut it open anyway. Because hope makes you stupid. The inside was green. Not in a poetic way. In a way that made your lungs ache just from the scent. You gagged, you wept, then you buried it, and tried not to imagine the sound it made as it settled into the earth, like something trying to come back. That was a good day, because at least the duck hadn't been cooked and served to someone else. At least no one smiled politely while swallowing infection. Which brings you to the funerary meals. The ones cooked not for the living, but for the dead. Meat wrapped in cloth. Bread soaked in wine. Fruits sealed in oil. Stored in tombs, sometimes for years. Until someone opens the grave and decides the afterlife's pantry is looking generous. You've eaten tomb food. Not proudly, not regularly. But when the work gets slow and the foreman look the other way, you've seen men pull a cake from a sealed jar, shrug, and take a bite. You've seen someone drink beer from a funerary vessel, spit once, then drink again. You've seen dried goose that was meant for eternity, rehydrated in temple broth, and served with onions so strong they mask the scent of formaldehyde and mildew. You once watched a priest eat from a platter that had spent a decade sealed next to a corpse and say, it still has the divine essence. Then he vomited in the bushes and blamed it on a jealous spirit. No one questioned it. You're not supposed to question divine food, even when it bubbles, even when it bites back. There's a kind of fear that grows in your stomach before food even touches it. A readiness, a bracing, because you've learned what food looks like when it dies twice. First in the field, then in the bowl. You've eaten lentils that dissolved into foam. Barley so fermented it stung your gums. Bread with maggots baked into the crust, like raisins with ambition. You've tried to explain to your child why the stew smells different tonight, and you've watched them nod like they understand. They don't, but they will. One day they'll scrape the black fuzz off a fig and chew it without flinching. One day they'll boil the same pot 4 times just to convince themselves the twitching was imagined. One day they'll swallow something they shouldn't, and whisper a prayer not to a god, but to their own stomach. Please, just this once, be kind, because food isn't a comfort anymore. It's a challenge, a dare, a ritual sacrifice offered to the digestive gods inside you. And sometimes they say no. You remember the man from the Canal Project? Trying to impress a noble by eating fish, still raw, caught from a part of the river known for strange colours. He smiled through it. then collapsed 3 hours later. Skin the colour of ash, breath like copper, eyes wide like they were trying to escape his face. They buried him with herbs, not for tradition, for the smell. Then they burned the rest of the fish, which made the whole village smell like sin and catacombs. And that's the part no one writes in the temple scrolls. Not the miracle of the Nile, not the fertile land, but the quiet, miserable truth. Sometimes the river feeds you. Sometimes it poisons you. Sometimes it does both, in the same mouthful. And you thank it either way, because you don't have the luxury to choose what you eat, only whether you'll try to finish it before it finishes you. There's a story you're told as a child, whispered by old women and ignored by priests, that every time a fly lands on your food, it carries with it a memory of death. You didn't believe it, until you watched a cluster of flies descend on a pot of lentils, and within a day your brother coughed until he bled. You buried him next to a patch of reeds where the flies always return. You don't question the story anymore. Flies are everywhere in Egypt. They're in your house before the sun rises. They live in your water jars. They bathe in your beer. They walk across your bread like it's a stage, and they're performing for an audience of one. You've learned to wave them away with your breath, not your hands. Your hands are usually occupied with grinding, mixing, praying. Breath is the only weapon you can afford. There are gods for flies, or maybe just one. You can't remember his name, but someone once said he protects the diseased. You wonder what kind of god guards a thing that turns your stew into a grave. Then again, everything in Egypt has a god. There's a god of rot, a god of fermentation, a god of insects, a god of stomachs, a god of stomach pain. You've prayed to all of them, sometimes in the same meal. You once sat down to eat and found a dead lizard inside your bread. It was curled up like it had been sleeping there since the flood season. You showed it to your father. He picked it out, flicked it into the dust, and handed the bread back. "Still warm," he said. "You're lucky." You nodded. You chewed. That's what luck looks like here. Bread that still counts as food, even when something else has already died in it. Your cousin once opened a storage pot and found it filled with beetles. They'd eaten through half the grain, laid eggs in the rest, and coated the inside with a layer of black that shimmered in the light. He stared at it, closed the lid, and told no one. You all ate from that grain for 2 weeks, because not eating was worse. Insects are constant. Ants, beetles, wasps. You've seen a wasp nest built inside a grain mill. The workers didn't remove it. They just ground it into the flour. You were told not to tell the priest, so you didn't. You once drank from a jar of beer and swallowed something that stung on the way down. You don't know what it was. You never asked. But for 3 days your throat felt like fire, and your breath smelled like honey and ash. You were told that meant a spirit had visited you. You hoped it wouldn't return. There's a kind of sickness that doesn't come from poison. It comes from understanding too much. Like when you realise the meat in the stew is bone, and the bone in the stew is someone's mistake. You found teeth in your food. More than once, not yours. The first time you gagged. The second time you stared. The third time you just moved it aside and kept eating. There's no room for horror when hunger is louder. Weather ruins more food than animals. Rain turns grain to mush. Heat curdles milk before it reaches your lips. Sand gets into everything. There is always sand. In the bread, in the beer, in the stew. You don't remember what food tastes like without grit. You once bit into something soft and thought, this feels wrong. Because softness is suspicious. Bread should fight back. Beer should chew. Stew should crunch. If it doesn't, it's spoiled. You hear a lot about the gods controlling the harvest. The sun god, the flood god, the god of winds and wing things. But no one talks about the god of decay. Maybe because you can't offer him anything he hasn't already spoiled. You tried once. Burned grain, moulded figs, a cracked jar of beer that smelled like wet rope. You left it on a stone, said a quiet prayer, walked away. The next day the offering was gone. You like to think that meant it worked, but the rats didn't look holy when you saw them running off with it. Rats are gods in their own way. They know how to survive. They eat everything. They multiply in silence. They live in the temple walls and the granaries, and sometimes in the baskets beside your sleeping mat. You've heard them at night, chewing, always chewing. Sometimes you dream that you're one of them, tiny, free, unburdened by ritual, just teeth and motion and hunger. And sometimes that dream is better than anything you've eaten that week. The worst meal of your life was also the most sacred. It was an offering loaf, baked with barley from a blessed harvest, milled by virgins, shaped by priests, and fired in a holy oven that hadn't seen ash in over a decade. It smelled like dust and lemon peel, looked like limestone, tasted like nothing, and broke free of your teeth. You were told to be grateful that the god had touched it, that every bite was filled with divine presence. You bled from the gums and whispered, "Thank you." That's how it works. You don't eat because you're hungry. You eat because the ritual demands it. Because to refuse would offend the gods. Because the taste of rot is easier to endure than the taste of spiritual shame. One time, the temple distributed meat to the workers. In celebration, they said, "You took your portion, thin and grey, wrapped in reeds." You knew better than to ask questions. You boiled it until it stopped foaming. The first bite was soft. The second bite was sour. The third bite moved. A worm. Small, white, threaded through the sinew like stitching. Still alive. You swallowed it anyway. Later, your stomach turned in slow, deliberate circles. You lay awake all night, wrapped in silence and sweat, praying to whichever god had claimed ownership of parasites. In the morning you vomited blood into the sand behind your house. A priest saw you, said nothing, just nodded like this was part of it. You'd completed the cycle. Blessing, consumption, suffering, balance. There are rules for how long meat can be stored. You've memorized none of them, because they don't matter. If the priest says it's fresh, you eat it, even if it's warm when it shouldn't be, even if it smells like rusted bronze and hot skin. There's no one left to complain to. Not in a world where the priests drink wine and call it sacred vinegar when it turns. Where a woman once fed her family cheese that had curdled into blue veins and said, "It tastes like the gods want us to remember something." You don't know what that means, but you ate the same cheese a week later and thought about her. She died not long after. No one mentioned the cheese, only the sin she must have carried that allowed her body to fail. That's how people explain sickness. Not contamination, not spoilage, but sin. A cracked pot means impure storage. Impure storage means spiritual neglect. Spiritual neglect means illness. Illness means punishment. And punishment means you deserved it. You once watched a child be beaten for sneezing during a meal. The priest said it was a sign of disrespect, that his body was rejecting the blessings. They made him eat twice as much to cleanse his rebellion. He threw up into a bowl. They made him eat that too. They called it a penance. You called it something else in your head, but only in your head. You knew better. The food that made people sick was always your fault, not the food's. It's easier to blame a cracked soul than a rotted stew. You've eaten things you can't name, not because they're rare, because they no longer resemble anything identifiable. Once, during the dry season, your neighbour brought over a dish she called river gift. It was gelatinous, grey, and smelled like wet rope. She said it came from a fish trap, that it might be fish or frog, or the fat from something larger that drifted in from the marsh. You asked no questions. You just closed your eyes and chewed. The texture was like chewing a tongue, but it was warm and it stayed down. That was all you needed. Sometimes you think about the word food, what it used to mean. You don't remember. It doesn't mean flavour, doesn't mean comfort, doesn't mean satisfaction. It means survival. Food is the thing between today and not today. Food is what you eat when you've run out of hope and are chewing on the leftovers. You once ate something described as post-sacrificial substance. It was meat, supposedly, dark, dry, already offered to the gods and returned. You asked if that meant it was safe. The priest laughed. Safe? He said. It's holy. What else matters? You bit down and felt your teeth sink into what might have been a tendon, or cloth, or nothing. You ate it anyway. Later you had a vision, or a fever, or a dream. You're still not sure. You saw a river made of blood. Not metaphorically. It shimmered. It steamed. It moved with purpose. There were fish swimming in it. But they didn't have eyes. Only mouths. Always open, always chewing. You woke up hungry, but couldn't make your hands reach for anything. Because the dream had made you remember something terrifying. That you don't know what food is anymore. You only know when it stops hurting, and that's when you stop eating. They tell you the gods don't eat people. They say that with confidence, like it's a promise. But you've seen enough to know the difference between a myth and a warning dressed in prayer. There's an old tomb in the hills outside your village, abandoned, cracked open by thieves years ago. You were young then? Curious? Stupid? You and your brother snuck inside. It smelled like wet metal and old incense. There was dust thick enough to crush underfoot. And at the back, on the offering table, was a bowl. It wasn't empty. Inside, blackened meat, shriveled figs, a streak of hardened honey, and a finger. Not mummified, not prepared, just there. Bent, dark, forgotten. Your brother laughed. You didn't. You couldn't stop thinking, was this a gift to the gods? Or a part of the person buried here? Was it food or a warning? No one ever answered. But a week later your brother got sick. Not badly, just a fever. The priest said it was a spiritual debt. Your brother didn't die, but he stopped laughing around food after that. So did you. There are rumours, whispers not meant for daylight, that certain cults feed their dead to the earth. Not in burial, not in ceremony, in slices. That their priests take the bodies of the chosen and render them into sacred offerings. A tongue for Thoth, a liver for Osiris, a heart for Ra, if it was still beating when it came out. You don't believe it, until you see a man stagger out of the temple kitchens one night, weeping, hands covered in something dark that isn't wine. He doesn't speak, just walks into the river and sits down. No one asks where he went. You hear stories about people who starve on purpose, to get closer to the gods, to burn away impurity, to become light enough for the soul to rise. A priest once said, to feel hunger is to become divine. You saw him later in private, choking down sweetbread behind the temple with oil dripping down his chin. You wanted to throw a stone at him. Instead, you closed your eyes and imagined what it would feel like to forget what food is. There are people in your village who fast not for the gods, but because they're scared. Scared of impurity, scared of punishment, scared of one more meal that makes their body rebel. You once went 5 days without eating. Not because there wasn't food, because you looked at a bowl of lentils and saw it twitch. Your neighbour told you it was just the heat. That steam moves things. That you were seeing things. You ate anyway. Then spent the night, curled beside the fire pit, dry heaving into your own hands, whispering the names of gods you didn't believe in anymore. And the gods don't eat people, but they take from you, piece by piece, your appetite, your taste, your trust, your memory. You remember when food was joy, not a celebration, not a feast, just joy. A fig split with your sister, a slice of onion dipped in oil, a cup of beer that didn't sting on the way down. You remember laughing, not a lot, but enough. You don't laugh now. No one does. Now every bite is a guess, a gamble, a slow negotiation between your body and your fear. And even when the meal is safe, even when it's warm, or fresh, or free, you chew like someone might be watching. Because someone always is. The gods don't eat you, but they watch you eat yourself. And you let them. Because at least it's something. At least you're not forgotten. At least your stomach still remembers what to ask for. Even if your mouth is tired of saying thank you. Even if the food fights back. Even if the silence afterward is the only part that ever feels clean. You don't feel hungry anymore. You just feel hollow, not empty, not aching, just smooth on the inside. Like the space where appetite used to live has been sanded down by time. You eat when you must. But it doesn't feel like feeding. It feels like maintenance. Like patching a hole in a wall you stopped living in years ago. Someone hands you a bowl of stew. You take it. You chew. You swallow. But your body doesn't react. There's no warmth, no comfort, no gratitude. Only the faint, bitter taste of duty. You remember being young. Food was colour then, scent, texture. A pear stolen from a merchant's cart. So ripe it dripped down your chin before you could even swallow. Bread from your mother's oven, still warm in your hands as you ran down the road. You used to care about taste. You used to dream in flavour. Now your dreams are grey, silent, mostly about water. You sit in your home and stir a pot that doesn't need stirring. There's nothing inside. You're out of lentils, out of onion. You're boiling water because it gives you something to listen to. The bubbling is soft, gentle, almost kind. More kindness than you've tasted all month. Your neighbour asks if you've eaten. You lie and say yes, because you're tired of explaining that no, not eating isn't a tragedy anymore. It's just routine. People talk about starvation like it's loud, like it howls, claws, screams. But they're wrong. Real starvation is quiet. It whispers. It wraps itself around your ribs like a second skin and presses down until even your hunger is too tired to object. You've watched friends disappear. Not die. Disappear. They stop showing up. Stop talking. Stop opening their doors. You see them weeks later, thin, grey, blinking too slowly. And you know they've crossed over. Not into death, into that place behind hunger, where you don't want anything anymore. Not food, not warmth, not laughter. Just rest. There's a man in your village, old, hunched, eyes like wet ash. No one remembers his name. He sits near the temple gate and chews on dry reeds. Every day. Same motion, same pace. You asked him once what he was doing. He said, "Tricking my stomach." You laughed. He didn't. He said it again, quieter. If the mouth moves, the stomach remembers. You think about that when you're alone. Sometimes you chew air. Pretend it's bread. Swallow nothing and imagine it fills you. It doesn't, but it helps. A priest once told you that hunger is a gift. That makes you humble, pure, closer to the divine. You looked at his gold cuffs, at the oil glistening on his fingers, at the half-eaten goose leg resting beside his scroll, and you smiled, because you've learned how to smile when you want to scream. There's an art to it, a kind of muscle memory. You use it when your child asks, "Will there be dinner tonight?" And you say, "Maybe." Even though you know the answer is no. Even though you already gave them your portion at midday. Even though your stomach is twisting itself into knots just to stay quiet. They look at you with hope. And that's what hurts most. Not the hunger, the hope. Because it means they still believe you. Still believe that food is coming. That something better is waiting. That the gods are watching. That any of this still matters. You wish you could believe it too. But faith is hard to chew when your mouth is dry. You stop counting meals. Not because you're disciplined. Because they blur. One day is flatbread and beer. The next is nothing. The next is a handful of grain chewed raw, bitter, unwashed. Eventually you stop remembering what came when. You stop remembering what came at all. Memory requires energy, desire, a spine. You no longer have those. What you do have is rhythm, wake, move, swallow, wait. Sometimes that rhythm includes food. Mostly it doesn't. No one talks about the time after hunger, when your body quiets, when the cravings fade, when everything inside you slows down like a story winding to its final words. You're still breathing, still walking, but not entirely here. Like the part of you that used to anticipate flavour has packed its bags and gone somewhere far away, leaving only muscle and obligation behind. People start describing you differently. They don't say thin, they say faded, drawn, light, as if you're no longer solid, as if you could be folded and placed on a shelf between grief and salt. Someone offers you honey once, a rare thing, a miracle, a smear of gold on a piece of old bread. You take it, you hold it, and then you give it away to a child, a neighbour. You don't even remember who. You just know you didn't eat it. Not because you're kind, not because you're noble, because you didn't want it, because part of you whispered, "It'll taste too good," and remind you what you've lost. So you gave it away, and then you sat very still and tried not to wonder if that was your last chance to feel joy. You haven't laughed in a long time. You smile, out of habit, to make others feel safe. But laughter requires weight, a fullness, some anchor in the chest that lifts the sound out. You're too hollow now. When others laugh around food, you pretend to join in. You move your mouth. You raise your eyebrows. But nothing comes out. The sound inside you is gone. Sometimes you talk to your stomach. Not like a joke, like a prayer. You place your hand there, gently, and whisper, "Thank you for trying." Not because you believe it's listening, but because something should be thanked. And you don't know who else deserves it anymore. Not the gods, not the priests, not the sky. Just this quiet, shriveled thing inside you that's still asking for something even when you've run out of answers. You used to have cravings, not anymore. Now there are only images, quick flashes, an apple, a cake, a cup of clear water with mint leaves in it. But they're not desires, they're fossils, echoes of a time when you expected to feel good again. You once dreamed of eating until you were full. Now you dream of watching others eat, sitting beside them, silent, invisible, content just to witness fullness happening to someone else. There's no jealousy, just distance. As if joy is something you lived in once and now can only visit in dreams as a ghost. Your name doesn't taste right anymore. You hear it less often. You say it even less than that. And when you do, it sounds like it belongs to someone else. Someone heavier. Someone real. You catch glimpses of yourself in still water and wonder who the reflection belongs to. Not because it's unfamiliar, but because it's missing something. You used to be someone. You used to talk with your hands. You used to hum while carrying firewood. You used to sit too close to the hearth just for the warmth. Now your hands stay still. Your mouth stays shut. And your body knows better than to burn calories it won't get back. It's not depression. It's not sadness. It's adaptation. You're not mourning. You're conserving. Words are expensive. Movement is risky. Hope is dangerous. Even your thoughts have slowed. Not in panic. Not in confusion. But the way an old dog lays down in the road and watches the sky for hours because it doesn't expect to be called. You remember people, but only in parts. Your mother's laugh. Your friend's crooked tooth. A voice saying your name from a far distance, like a prayer meant for someone who hasn't arrived yet. You try to hold on to those scraps like warmth, but they fall through your fingers. Everything does. Food used to mark the day. Stew for the afternoon. Beer in the evening. Bread when the sun touched the tips of the temple pillars. Now the days pass without shape. No meals, no difference. No celebration. Just light and dark. Cold and not cold. Breath and silence. You wonder if this is what the afterlife feels like. Not paradise. Not punishment. Just sameness. You don't want to die, you want a reason to be alive. And that used to be food. Not just eating, but making. Sharing. Smelling stew and knowing someone cared enough to make it. Now the only thing that fills the air is smoke from empty pots. Ashes where taste used to be. There was a boy once who brought you a piece of dried fig. You didn't know him. He didn't say anything. Just placed it in your hand, nodded, and walked away. You stared at it for almost an hour. It was small, hard, sweet. You didn't eat it. You just held it, smelled it, put it in your pocket and carried it around like a relic. It made you feel like a person again. Not because of what it was, but because someone had given it to you. Unasked, unrequired, without ceremony. That fig stayed with you longer than most memories. You lost it eventually, like everything else. But you still check your pockets sometimes, just in case. You don't cook anymore. There's nothing to cook with. Nothing to cook for. Even when you have something to heat, barley, onions, a scrap of salted fish, your hands hesitate. The effort feels too large, the reward too small. So you eat raw, eat cold, eat silently. Food isn't an act now. It's a fact, like dirt, like sleep. You no longer care about taste. You care about swallowing. Not choking, not vomiting, not drawing attention. If you can get it down, it's a good day. You no longer think about food as something you want. It's not a desire. It's not even a need. It's just a thing that used to happen more often. You've become accustomed to the dullness. Not pain, not longing, just a background pressure, like air too heavy to name. You pass the food stalls without looking. You smell the roasted onions, the oil, the faint scent of salted goose drifting down from a merchant's canopy, and it feels like watching someone else's life. You used to live there, inside that world where food had meaning, where sweetness was more than memory. Now it's theatre. You are the quiet crowd watching from behind the curtain, not applauding, just waiting for it to end. You've grown used to being forgotten at meals. They don't skip you out of cruelty. They skip you out of certainty. They know you'll say no, or nothing. You've said, "I'm not hungry," so many times you can't tell if it's still a lie. You stop talking as much. You find that speaking burns energy, and you have less of that than anyone wants to admit. So you nod, you shrug, you hum once in a while to remind yourself you still can. There's a corner in your home where food used to be stored. It's empty now. Not recently. It's been empty for so long that the dust has made shapes in the absence. You sit near it sometimes, not to grieve, not to hope, just to feel close to the place where you once kept joy. There are days when you forget what food even looks like. You think round, maybe, brown, warm, but those are guesses. They're descriptions from stories, from old dreams. You once dreamed of eating a peach. You've never tasted one. In the dream, it was gold and soft and dripping. You held it too tightly and it bled down your wrist. You woke up crying. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was too real. More real than anything you've eaten in years. Someone offered you soup a few days ago. You don't remember who. Just a hand, and a bowl, and the smell of something kind. You took it. You brought it to your lips. Then you paused, and waited. Because part of you was afraid. Afraid that tasting kindness again would undo everything you've built to survive without it. So you waited, and the soup cooled, and then it was just liquid. You drank it. But the moment had passed. You didn't taste it. You've stopped tasting most things. Everything has the same texture now. Soft, thin, muted, like paper that used to be red, now left outside in the rain. You sometimes watch birds eat. They tear at grain, peck at the dry earth, swallow tiny things too fast to name. You envy them. Not because they're full, but because they don't seem to question what they're given. There's no ritual, no guilt, no hesitation, just hunger and answer. You try to imagine what that feels like, to eat without shame, to want without apology. You can't remember. You sit in the quiet now, often alone, sometimes holding a cup with nothing in it, just to feel the weight in your hand, just to remember what it's like to expect something. And when you finally set the cup down, you feel lighter, not better, not stronger, just less present. As if the parts of you that once held hunger have emptied out, and the space where your needs lived now echoes softly in the dark. You are not starving. You are past that. You are the thing left behind when starvation forgets to finish its work. You are not dead. But you're not waiting to be alive either. There's no final meal. There's no feast coming. No miracle. No God with warm hands and barley cakes and a pitcher of beer. There is only now. Only the slow crumbling of the place inside you, where fullness used to wait. You sit still. You breathe once, twice. And then the room forgets you are ever hungry at all. The room is quiet now. There's nothing left to eat, nothing left to say. Not even the gods are watching anymore. Just the sound of your breath. Soft, heavy, like sand slipping down the last inch of an hourglass. Outside, the wind turns over in its sleep. Somewhere a pot boils for no one. And you sit still, not waiting, not hoping, just being. The hunger is gone. Or maybe it never was. The story fades, the night deepens, and the silence at last feels full. Good night. Or whatever's left of it.